Take that one and everybody else.
Ready? Okay. I would like to call the September 30, 2025 work session to order with 6 p.m. Today, Councilor Santiago is excused absence. Other than that, all councilors are present, and we're also joined by members of our Planning Commission and our 50-year plan SAC committee. Tonight is a work session. We're talking about the 50-year plan follow-up. It's kind of a special meeting. At the last meeting or so, we had, to me, some big information come through. And after 2 or 3 years of this committee, I felt some of us wanted some more information to hear from the Planning Commission, the 50-year commission. So we brought some questions. Everyone sent some questions in to Lori Joseph, and she got us some information. So we're kind of going over that tonight. Typically, public comment is during our regular meetings. And although this is not a city council regular meeting, we will have public comment tonight. We will follow the regular public comment rule, but we will allow citizens to speak about items on the agenda, matters on the agenda, because that's what we're here tonight. So if you have to speak about the 50-year plan, you can. Members of the public addressing council are requested to give their name and city of residence. Please try not to repeat questions or comments to allow for more speakers and new comments. We have received comments from various people, and if there's more comments, that would be great. During this discussion, you will all be able to speak too, especially if you're on the committees. We will have open discussion. Media members of the audience, though, if you have comments, that would be best during public comment. Speakers will limit their testimony to 5 minutes, and we are limited to 30 minutes total for all public comments. I'll have a timer. Helps. But do you have anything signed up, Susan, at this time? Okay. We'll have one. Yeah. Public comments?
Yeah.
Maybe you could stand and then give a microphone.
Yeah.
We will be going over tonight, just to kind of go over the whole packet, all the questions that came up. She's going to be going over those, and we'll have a few questions going forward of what we're looking for at the end. And so if you aren't sure, and you'll have opportunities to speak throughout and answer questions and ask questions, but if there's new information or something you want to spend your 5 minutes giving, you can. And so we'll start with Alicia, if you're ready. Tigus. We do have a letter here, public comment from you here as well in front of us.
Good evening. My name is Alicia Higas. I'm a resident of Scappoose. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I am here tonight not just for my family, but because this is a community safety issue that everyone should be aware of. Parents across Oregon are already concerned about the governor's school cell phone ban, especially after the misconduct exposed in the St. Helens School District last year. If it could happen there, it could also be happening here and go unnoticed because of the same failures in reporting, oversight, and accountability that I'm speaking about tonight. In Oregon, the Child Abuse Hotline received 161,780 contacts in 2023, but fewer than half were documented as reports, and less than half of those were assigned for CPS investigation. Thousands were closed before an investigation even began. There is a structural loophole. Reports can be screened out at intake, and if that process is influenced by those in power, for example, when a police chief or superintendent minimizes the concern, the case can be closed before any investigation ever begins. And even when reports are accepted, only a fraction are considered founded, and many victims never receive protection or services. The system is leaky, and too many children fall through the cracks. Locally, I believe there are hundreds, if not thousands, of unwritten or misleading police reports in Scappoose. Without reports, there is no accountability. Families like mine are left without protection or justice. In January 2025, Chief Llewellyn submitted a hotline report with false and misleading statements. We had spoken with him days before, so there was no misunderstanding. He chose what to write, and his misrepresentation caused the matter to be closed before an investigation even began. Every officer swears an oath to uphold the Constitution. Under federal law, 18 U.S.C. 242 and 18 U.S.C. 241, this is more than misconduct. It's a violation of rights. This council has seen undeniable evidence of misconduct, falsified statements, failures to report, retaliation, and you have taken no corrective action. Ignoring evidence does not make you neutral. It makes you complicit. At the last meeting, after I left, the councilor president, Tyler Miller, claimed my comments were defamatory. It is not defamatory to speak about or make complaints regarding city officials or their pay when those subjects were publicly discussed by this council on March 3rd and March 17th, 2025. By labeling my factual comments as defamatory, Mr. Miller attempted to undermine my credibility and make it appear as though I was lying. I was exercising my First Amendment right to free speech, and nothing I said was untrue. Calling my statement defamatory was a false characterization intended to mislead the public. At the last meeting, City Manager Ben Bergener asked if council wanted him to enforce 3 local laws already on the books. Ordinance 910 on massage licensing, the city's liquor license requirements, and the social gaming rules. This was framed as avoiding duplication with state agencies, but this seems to be a request for permission to not uphold the law. Scappoose is not so large that enforcing these local requirements would overwhelm the police department. The city manager is making excuses, and Mayor Backus appeared comfortable with those excuses. This is deeply concerning. Oregon Ethics Law, ORS 244, prohibits selective enforcement. To apply laws unequally is not just unethical, it is abuse of discretion, oppression, and a betrayal of the oath of office. Council members, your duty is to uphold the law and protect the people you serve. Equal protection under the law is not optional. Accountability is not optional. By failing to act, you are violating federal law. You are betraying the oath you swore. Because of the lack of integrity among officials, the loopholes in reporting systems, and the absence of accountability, our youth and our community are not safe until corrective actions are taken. So I ask again, what are you going to do about it?
Moving on to next public comment. Here, 2 here. Let's go with that one. Let's go with Scott Parker.
Excuse me, I can't see, can't hear. Thank you, council members, planning commission members, and staff for allowing me to speak. I realize this is primarily a work session and you've got a lot of ground to cover. So hopefully I can share my thoughts and directions regarding my property. I own the approximate 51-acre site on the north end of town known as Scappoose Sand and Gravel. It is presently in Columbia County. It's in the urban growth boundary and it's zoned light industrial now. And it will be annexed into the city when the filling reclamation is completed. It's my belief that both tax lots, there are two tax lots there, should be annexed together, and they should be annexed under an expanded commercial zone. It's critical part of a master planning process that I'm going to be going through. And the expanded commercial zone is the most liberal zoning that could be allowed on the property. Mr. Weston and Mr. Freeman provided the city with a huge industrial reserve, light industrial reserve of land. And if my property comes into the city under light industrial, it's just going to add to that backlog of property. Another consideration that needs attention that I will be attending to is the fact that the majority of the property is in the floodplain. We have reclaimed it, the majority of the property, to above the 100-year floodplain elevation, but it needs to be removed from the FEMA maps. And the FEMA is not taking applications at present. I had a surveyor do a topographical survey of the property a couple of weeks ago, and I'm going through with an engineer, going through the topography of the property, and it will all have to come out before any development can take place there. I am going to be applying for that amendment on the map as soon as FEMA starts taking the application. The original 113 acres evolved from a farm that my grandfather purchased in 1940. It became a critical source of rock for the entire area, and then a much needed reclamation site that an awful lot of the local and other outside projects used for depositing material, dirt. We're now almost fully reclaimed. Once filling is complete, not before, I'll ask the city to annex the property in. The site has been under my family's ownership and control for 85 years. That's more years than I've got, thank goodness, but not many. I'm the third generation to manage the property. My grandson started work for me in June. He is the fifth generation. So the family has been nursing the property along all those years. When I took ownership in 1978, I continued the mining operation, but I also helped bring the concrete pipe manufacturing company into the area. When OMIC and Boeing and OIT approached me about establishing the only advanced manufacturing and innovation center of that kind in the United States, I became very strong advocate for them and a supporter of them. I donated property for a city street so they'd have access to it. I invested a huge amount of money and my own funds into a sewage pumping station that not only serves OMIC, but will serve the entire site. My family's long history of providing natural resources, jobs, and educational opportunities for the community has gone on longer than most. I know how to break rocks. I don't know how to develop property, but I'm not ignorant, and I need help in doing that. I have gone out for an RFP to a number of different companies asking for a highest and best use scenario on the property and the process to develop a master plan for the property. I've received some of those back, and I'm looking at those right now. But in the interim, I entered into conversations with a company called the Romano Group. They are actually the company that recently signed a contract with the city of St. Helens for their waterfront development. And I know Romano has spoken with staff on my behalf, and we're working very closely to have them do the master plan for the property. They've got a lot of experience in doing projects of this size, and I'm sorry.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Mr. Parker,
Yeah,
you mentioned when reclamation is complete. So do you have an anticipated date when the reclamation will be complete?
that's a good question. It's a lot of it's dependent upon construction in the area. That's where we get our dirt from. The survey that I just had done, I don't have all of the quantities from that yet. My guesstimation is probably within the next 2 to 3 years.
Thank you.
There is enough dirt on the property now that I could raise it all above the floodplain by moving dirt, but that's really expensive. And with FEMA still not even taking applications, the timing is, hopefully it'll be right. We'll be full and FEMA will say, that's it. So,
Thank you.
Mr. Parker, will you be available to answer some questions throughout our meeting if we have any for you?
by all means,
regarding this property?
by all means.
Okay,
Okay.
all right, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. I think there's another pink slip out there possibly. One, I just am asking, Don Hendrickson is not in the room tonight. He provided a letter into the public or into the records as well, OMEC R&D. I think we have copies back there if anybody wants to read those. I'm not going to read it, but we'll add it as public comment written. Any more public comment? I see none online. Okay,
Joe?
yes, yeah,
Me, that's okay.
yes.
Good evening, council members. I was here a couple weeks ago. My name is Angela Rowe, and I am one of the owners of Scappoose Hospitality Group, which is the organization that is currently working to bring the first hotel to Scappoose. This is a project that I am investing my own money in and my own background and expertise. We are currently in negotiations with Hilton for our franchise, and we are meeting with city staff tomorrow on our pre-app. So we are moving things along diligently. The 50+ acres that is of subject tonight is critical to the overriding success of that hotel. Hotels are places for people to stay, heads in beds. We need to be able to fill that hotel. So providing extra commercial, residential, environmental places to live, work, and play is going to be critical to supporting that development. And I hope that you would take that into consideration. Thank you.
We got one more, Susan.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Mike Thompson. I live at 50995 Southwest Old Portland Road. The property that I own is adjacent to believe it's zone 7 that you're looking at taking in. We submitted a letter, and we just wanted to go over and reiterate our adversity against moving into the 50-year plan, where we have a lot of ancestry there that do not want to move into that area. We were trying to be open and upfront with you because I know you need to meet your goals, and we wanted to exonerate on that. As we go through the evening, if there's any questions I can answer, I'd love to do that.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think that's all for outside. I do have one public comment I wanted to do myself, if I can, since I never get to participate. I'm gonna start my class. I wasn't at the beginning of the 50-year plan, so as I came in, I tried to understand and learn. And so to me, this is kind of what I'm basing all my decisions and thoughts about. The 50-year plan is essential for guiding the long-term growth and sustainability of the city of Scappoose. As the community continues to grow and evolve, decisions made today will shape the character, economy, and livability of the city for generations to come. A thoughtful, forward-looking plan provides a framework for balancing housing needs, economic development, infrastructure demands, and environmental stewardship. One of the most critical components of this planning process is gathering complete and accurate information about potential urban growth boundary expansion. Without a comprehensive understanding of land availability, infrastructure capacity, and development constraints, it is impossible to determine the best solutions that will serve both current and future residents. Equally important in this process is the integration of diverse perspectives and expertise. Public input ensures that the voices of residents are heard and that the plan reflects the values and priorities of the community. Professional consultation brings technical expertise, best practices, and innovative approaches to complex land use challenges. Meanwhile, the knowledge and experience of city staff provide a practical understanding of Scappoose' unique needs and opportunities. Together, these inputs will help shape building codes, zoning decisions, and land use policies. They're not only effective today, but resilient and adaptable for decades to come. By committing to a 50-year vision grounded in data, collaboration, and shared values, Scappoose can chart a course that ensures thoughtful growth, preserves quality of life, and secures a prosperous future. Thank you. Okay, so that is what I'm looking at. Any more? Okay, moving on then, we are into the meat of the meeting, new business. We are reviewing staff memo dated September 23, 2025 with responses to emailed council questions. Community Development Director Lori Oliver Joseph will take the lead on this.
Thank you, Mayor, council members, planning commissioners, and 50-year plan committee members. Thank you all for being here tonight. Again, the purpose is to discuss these last remaining questions so that staff and the consultant team can bring the project to a close and then head to adoption hearings for the final products of this plan. So again, as the mayor mentioned during the August 18th work session, it was very apparent that there were additional questions we had. There was, this rezone consideration that was new information to review. So tonight, my hope is to go ahead and go through the packet, try and summarize the staff responses. This has been out for a week, so hopefully everyone's had a chance to look at it. I'm going to try and move through it, but of course, if you have questions, please indicate that to the mayor, and the mayor will let you know when he's ready for your question. Again, by having the questions answered, it will allow us then to complete our final analysis and findings. This project, just to back up, this project originated as a council goal to look out 50 years at land needs that will help the city to really understand where it plans to grow over time, which will help inform the city of where to invest in infrastructure. And then also through the establishment of urban reserves for a 50-year land need, it makes all future UGB expansions much more efficient. Again, urban reserves are the first priority lands to come in for UGB expansion. Staff and the consultant team have conducted community outreach through the project. There have been 16 stakeholder advisory committee meetings, 15 work sessions with council and the planning commission to get feedback and direction as we've gone along. This has been a very large project, as you all know. There are quite a few components. And again, thank you all for your time and commitment to this project. So staff did receive questions from Counselor Holmes and Mayor Backus during the open question period. And we also received an email from Counselor Haugen, thank you, on suggested next steps. Staff prepared the council question responses after discussions with city manager and city attorney. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. This will be on page 3 of your packets. The question number 1, what development uses are allowed in light industrial zoned parcels? And Beth, if you want to share screen and pull up that memo. Perfect. We'll have it up on the screen shortly. In other words, what could be done with the 51 acres without outright commercial zoning? So I did include Municipal Code Chapter 17.70. That is the light industrial chapter of code that sets out permissible, outright permitted and conditional uses. So the notable permitted uses that are commercial in nature include bakeries, automobile sales, retail facilities on sites larger than 100,000 square feet, gas stations, and then there's some additional conditional uses such as restaurants, commercial amusement facilities, and food cart pods. Again, the entire list is attached as Exhibit 6. What could be some candidate areas of the city, likely existing residential, like what is on 2nd Street behind the Wigwam, for rezoning from residential to expanded commercial activity in the downtown core areas? So the street behind the Wigwam is Southwest 1st Street, and it's already zoned commercial. So one of the things you'll notice, and Beth, if you could pull up that downtown overlay zoning map. Not quite centered there. This is also included in your packets if you want to look at it slightly closer while Beth works on getting that centered a little more. Is there any way to increase that at all? Okay. So what you'll notice here, and it can be a little bit deceiving because you see a lot of existing older homes in that area, but the residential in that area is essentially legal non-conforming use because it was residential to begin with, and at some point the city rezoned that to commercial. Since this area is within the downtown overlay, it does provide additional options for reduced lot sizes and setbacks, and that's to accommodate the smaller lot sizes in the central core of the city. But it's, again, a little difficult to see. But if you look on the west side of Highway 30 from Scappoose-Vernonia Road all the way down to the middle school, that is essentially all commercial base zoning, general commercial base zoning. And then on the east side of Highway 30, there's a mix of expanded commercial up Northeast 1st Street and all the way out towards West Lane Road along Columbia Avenue. And then there's a small portion of R4 zoned land south of the library area. So again, this, while it appears that it might be residential, the majority of the downtown overlay zone is already zoned commercial. So that has been included in the packet as well. And then in addition to even the residential zoned areas, they do allow for some residential uses, including bed and breakfast facilities, professional offices, and mixed use buildings. So there is some flexibility there. I'm going to go ahead and go on to question 3. Is there a way to achieve both goals, creating a commercial zone of equal size to the area with Fred Meyer on the north end of town and diversifying commercial development opportunities throughout the town? So yes, you could, council could decide to do a full or partial rezone of the 51 acres at the north end of town, which could support similar commercial opportunities as the Fred Meyer shopping district on the south end of town. There are some existing opportunities throughout town now with some vacant or partially vacant expanded commercial properties that are currently for sale, and then also redevelopment of existing residential properties. So when a new property or when a property redevelops, say they take off the residential older home on those properties, they would have to conform to the current zoning of that parcel for redevelopment. And then Beth, can you pull up the map associated with this question? So again, I just wanted the council to have, and can you make that any bigger? Yes. So on the left, you'll see the pink colors throughout town. These are commercially designated properties on the comprehensive plan map. So anything in pink there is either planned for commercial use because it's not in city limits yet, or it has commercial zoning and is in city limits or expanded commercial zoning. To the right, you'll see this is the buildable lands inventory map from the economic opportunities analysis. And anything, you'll see that dark red color where Beth has her mouse throughout town from the south end up to the north end. Those are properties that are either zoned commercial or expanded commercial that still have development capability, are either vacant or partially vacant.
Question, is that the lawn right behind the lodge, the dark red? where the
Yeah,
cursor is?
yes, that's
Okay.
correct. That's correct, Mayor. So again, this is just to illustrate that there is commercial from the north end of the UGB to the south end of the UGB with additionally properties that are looking to rezone as part of this process. And those are indicated, you'll see on both maps in green.
Now, Lori, just for quick clarification, on the right side though, that does not include the properties that are residential that could be redeveloped to commercial in the middle of town, correct?
That's
Okay, so
So
there's still
that's
additional
correct.
beyond that that could be even
So
commercial.
where you can see where those properties are is on the pink, the dark pink on the left throughout the center of town, but that's correct. It's not, it's not saying, hey, this is currently has a house on it and can redevelop, but those are additional
That's good.
opportunities.
Can I
Yeah.
ask a question about the timeline for that? So when the area in the pink that's currently residential, when was it rezoned to expanded commercial?
I'd have to go back and let me clarify, because I realized when I said that, I didn't mean rezoned, but when that was part of the original town that got platted when the town was created in 1921? Anyone for history buff? The original plat of the city created those real small lots, but the city did not have a zoning map until much later, and I'd have to do some research to get that date. So it's not to say that it was rezoned, it's to say that zoning was applied after those lots were already created.
So it's been decades
Yeah.
potentially that
Mhm.
there could have been commercial development and there just
That's
not.
has not.
That's correct.
And over the years, have we had a few houses tore down and built into commercial or into retail along that way, I'm sure.
Have you seen? So there is an existing older home. It's the Casey House on JP West and what would it be? Southwest First. That is a historic home, and actually it has been converted to a commercial Remax office. Actually, they'll be starting on their parking lot and such soon. So we do see slowly over time some things are redeveloping. There's also some housing that was put in by the Holmesons, I don't know, maybe 10, 12 years ago. So there's been a few things that have changed.
But typically redevelopment of current houses into commercial, it's a little more expensive. Their lots are smaller. It's hard to get your return on investment unless there is a coordinated enough of those two. I mean, each development has its own return on investment numbers it has to hit, but it is a little harder, I think, to take a current house on a smaller lot to redevelop into commercial. It can happen. It's just usually when there's no other options or it fits a certain business need.
And we've had a few townhomes or fourplex townhomes built there in the last 20 years versus retail.
So let's see, we need to revisit the community feedback and visioning done at the first town hall meeting, the 2022 ATM, where we kicked off the 50-year plan and the survey results that we gathered from different community events. We need to pair how that feedback pairs with what is being proposed or should be proposed. So community engagement regarding the 50-year plan included several discussions, I believe, at 3 different annual town meetings, Adventure Festival, Farmers Market, community conversations, and then the surveys that reached over 400 respondents. I did include as Exhibit 5 to this packet the 50-year plan outreach summary and draft vision statement. Now, this provides an overview of outreach efforts through July of 2022. I've included the vision statement here for the economic development portion of the vision. And additionally, attendees of the 2022 annual town meeting also completed a visioning exercise, you might recall, with the large scale maps of the city of Scappoose. They could share their ideas by putting stickers on the maps. There's images of that as well in the outreach summary. But I looked through there and tried to find, like, did anyone make comments on the gravel pit properties specifically? And then, so of the 8 maps, one of them indicated they envision the gravel pits to be a potential site for future commercial development. And the only way to discern that really was they had different colored stickers. So blue and pink were both associated with commercial development. One asked the question on their map, future of gravel quarry, is this good for commercial future? And then one included a comment about the area being good site for a transit hub with electrical charging stations. The remainder of the maps had no comments specific to the gravel pits. We also had community conversations and an online survey that asked the question, what about Scappoose would you like to see change in the future and what can improve? Since again, this is a forward-looking plan, I thought it would be helpful to include these items. So there was a list here that I've included that was pulled straight from that summary, outreach summary. So again, in looking at that list and in looking at how does this match kind of this still question before council about rezoning this acreage, I do think it could support a number of the community desires around community amenities, greater variety of retail options, attracting more local businesses, boosting economic development, and even connecting pedestrian infrastructure. And that's because there will be a requirement for that missing kind of piece of the CZ Trail to be constructed at the southern end of that southern property, just north of Crown-Zellerbach Road. That is included as a project in our transportation system plan. Number 5, and please let the mayor know if anyone has questions as we're going through. Number 5, I'd like to make sure we have an opportunity to engage with the 50-year plan committee members and potentially socialize the options with the public again. Perhaps even an event in the fall that we present the plan to the public and get their input. The 50-year plan stakeholder advisory committee members have been invited to this work session as requested by council. There has been considerable public involvement and outreach. And then once council provides direction to staff on the remaining questions, there obviously will be a series of hearings where the public can provide comment as well. In terms of socializing options, again, staff will just wait until after this work session to hear kind of what next steps look like. The mayor did ask me to inform him if any of the questions or requests are going to prolong the project or increase cost. This could, depending on what, kind of options looks like to present again to the public. Could prolong the project and could increase costs potentially. So I just wanted to raise that. Staff is available to carry out what council is looking for here, but just want to point that out. The other thing too is we'd want to be mindful that UGB expansions really are, if it's in regards to where to expand, et cetera, are rooted in state law. So we'd be wanting to be mindful about that as well, and might be a little hard for that to be really well communicated to the public. If we were to convert some or all of the 51 acres from light industrial to commercial, what safeguards could be put into place to ensure the vision presented to council and staff is what takes place on that parcel? So we did talk with the city attorney on this question. I think that one effective way to hold the vision presented to council is if the landowner were to consent to either a development agreement or what I think maybe would be termed, a better term would be like an annexation agreement. So in other words, if you were to redesignate this property as part of this process, a condition of approval could be that they would need to consent to signing an annexation agreement, which spelled out essentially what the city would require prior to annexation: creation of a master plan, a vision for how the property would develop in terms of the types of uses. So that would be a way that the council could have some assurance of what would, eventually develop on that property. It's just an opportunity to also write in that there would need to be cooperation, say with OMIC, because if OMIC's supporting this, they would need to know, what does that look like really? Is it really meeting the need that they were hoping for? An annexation or development agreement like this would get recorded against the property that would run with the land and apply to future owners as well.
Lori, a couple of quick questions.
Yes.
And this may actually go to Angela. Do you have a figure of how much land would be required for your anticipated hotel project?
So currently, we are slated on a 2.33 parcel located on Wagner Court that we have put under. Sure.
Your property is across the street from this.
So my property is across the street. It's on Wagner Court, and it's the lot number 3, which is 2.33 acres of land for the development of 107 room home 2 suites. That is the first hotel project. The second hotel project is one that we were looking at to further support the growth and development that we anticipate will happen. Once this hotel opens, we will then build a second hotel. And that hotel would be part of the 51 acres.
Okay, so phase 1 is 2.33 acres, and phase 2 would be on Mr. Parker's property.
Correct.
Okay, and then the second part of the question, Mr. Parker, are you amenable to working with the city on some kind of agreement as I just articulated?
By all means, a developmental agreement or an annexation agreement. I've spoken to Romano about this, and it would definitely, the city's going to have to approve any master plan I do anyway there. So by all means, I'd be willing to partake in that agreement.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I do have one question,
Yes.
since you're moving on. When you look at all this feedback and you said there were a couple items that could go towards match, but you don't, I'm looking through, there's really nothing in there that is anti or against that potential. I mean, we didn't know about it at the time, but nobody
Right.
has, no big growth, no big, facilities. I mean, there's nothing in any of them that would actually show that many of the community is against anything of that sort. I see that as well. Okay.
Okay, number 7, if we were to,
Oh, yes.
So with the, seeing some of the public testimony on this, with a development agreement or annexation agreement, can the city say that we don't want apartments or government subsidized apartments in an agreement like that?
so we can't go afoul of state law, and we'll get to that a little bit later because there is a question regarding, can we limit residential development entirely within the expanded commercial zone? No, we can't, and we'll get to that in a minute because again, we would run afoul of Oregon state law. But I do believe that there's flexibility to set out a vision for, say, potentially like what percentage of the land would multifamily be limited to, something along those lines. So the council is assured that we're not going to get all apartments on this property, but that there would be a component, which I think even, we've heard would be amenable to having some component of multifamily housing, just not the entire 60 acres developed with housing. So I do think that there would be a way to craft that into that vision. Mayor.
Thank you. Yes, Brian.
I had a question. Am I correct that by state law, we cannot, anybody building apartments on any site cannot turn down Section 8 housing? 'Cause my understanding is you can't unless it's carved out like senior housing or that kind of thing.
Capital A affordable housing, we call it. Yeah, and that's addressed in one of the questions here, question 16.
So that does mean, if I understand it correctly, that if we had a large amount of apartments, we could end up with a large amount of Section 8 housing as a possibility.
As a possibility.
Yes. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so number 7, if we were to expand the UGB to include the parcel as is, could it be converted to commercial in the future if the landowner wanted to pursue that? So point of clarification, this acreage is already in the UGB. It just hasn't been annexed into city limits yet. It's currently designated on the comp plan map as industrial, so it would be automatically zoned light industrial upon annexation in conformance with our annexation chapter of the development code, unless the comp plan map was amended to designate the parcel as commercial, which would then be zoned expanded commercial upon annexation. So if council decided not to move forward with the rezone as part of this process, then yes, all or some of the acreage could be rezoned at some future date. There's nothing preventing the owner from bringing an application forward for rezone redesignation at some future date. Okay, number 8, what are the economic benefits of rezoning excess industrial land to expanded commercial? So increased tax revenues are a possibility once the property annexes into city limits. And that's just, even if it was industrial, we would have increased tax revenues once it annexed into the city. However, since commercial development may occur sooner than industrial development due to its location along, Highway 30 and Crown Z and West Lane, it's possible it could develop a little sooner than an industrial use would. The other thing about this property is that the acreage is not within the urban renewal district. And then that means that tax revenues would be retained as city revenues and not flow into the urban renewal revenues. Again, if it flows into the city tax revenues, it's not restricted for any type of use. It can be used for parks, police, etc. Let's see.
Well, since you brought that up,
Yeah.
can that be looked at as a urban renewal district? Are we already at our 25% of our city is a urban renewal, so we can't have a second urban renewal district? We know that.
We can adjust boundaries if needed, even with our current opening. There are ways to go about that if there was looking at that to see if it would work. I don't have the exact study for that acreage ready, but there are ways to do multiple urban renewals or to adjust what we currently have to fit. If we wanted to alter those boundaries a little bit.
Not that we've ever mentioned it or talked about it or
Right.
anything, but
Yeah, and I believe Chris is saying we're nearly maxed out. That's what I remembered as well. I think we are kind of limited at where we're at now, but you can amend.
I remember we're
boundaries.
close to 21% of the city
Yeah.
acreage and you can only go to 25 or something, so we really don't have.
This would be adding.
Closer than that, because we added the Keys Reservoir into that.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so that is To be determined. Number 8, we are still on this. Okay. The other issue or the other thing to consider is that rezoning the land to commercial would likely have fewer impacts to the city's wastewater and water systems, as well as, it likely would not need large amounts of power. We've been hearing there's some concerns with that. Again, because commercial uses generally place less demand on these systems than industrial uses would. And then again, just having more commercially zoned land available at the north end of the city could provide opportunities for larger scale mixed use developments, retail and service businesses that would serve the community and support OMIC. Expanded commercial is a flexible zone. It allows for a greater variety of development to occur, including some light manufacturing and research uses. So again, this just could make the property a little more flexible to, adapt to market conditions in the future, depending on what the need might be. Number 9, could expanded commercial zoning attract types of businesses or developments that standard commercial zoning cannot? The response is that yes, it can. There's a list of additional uses in expanded commercial that general commercial does not have. However, and then I've provided here the purpose statement from the expanded commercial zone, which the first one listed is for combining light manufacturing, office, retail sales, and complementary related uses. So I'm not going to go through all of those, but the difference between expanded commercial and general commercial is that the general commercial essentially is for those lots that are in the center of town that are smaller, and we would see that this land would be a better fit anyway for the expanded commercial zone, which is what it would automatically rezone to if it was designated commercial, just because it does have those additional uses that kind of work well with OMIC.
What makes it automatically go as an EC then?
So that's what's in our zoning code chapter of the development code. It'll list all the comp plan designations, and then it will say upon zoning, it annexes in as X. And so for commercial, it annexes in as expanded commercial. Again, being because those commercially zoned properties are all along Highway 30 in that historic core of the city.
Thank you.
So number 10, what are the potential economic development advantages of one large contiguous commercial site versus multiple smaller parcels? Some potential advantages I've listed here. Large commercial sites allow for larger scale cohesive developments with a wide array of supporting uses. These can be master planned to ensure efficient utility infrastructure and internal connectivity to multiple uses, which reduces traffic external to the site. This results in reduced construction costs to the developer, less costly maintenance of city infrastructure, and a more compact use of land. Again, this next bullet point is just about transportation studies. Do find that consumers tend to make trips with multiple destinations, so things clustered together. So congregating commercial activities together leads to a greater chance of success for all the businesses involved, and this is easier to accomplish on a larger site. Again, when master planning a large site, it's advantageous to start with a large parcel rather than assembling one from smaller parcels, as Ben was mentioning earlier. So having to assemble a large parcel by purchasing multiple smaller parcels, it just increases the cost and time for development. It also decreases certainty of the development because of the need to purchase, additional smaller lots and combine them together from multiple owners in most cases. And then Scappoose mainly has disconnected small commercially zoned sites available for development. This is noted in the draft DOA, Exhibit 23. And Beth, if you want to pull that up, I don't know, Beth, if you want to talk through any of that, but I have, I'll just read off here. So This table shows that of the 20 acres of developable commercial land within city limits, none are more than 10 acres in size, and only 2 parcels are in the 5 to 10 acre range. With the majority of the parcels, 6 of the 11 are between a half acre to 2 acres. So this large acreage at the north end of town just could be a nice complement to some of the smaller parcels we have scattered throughout town. And again, Beth, if you go to that, to the map that we had previously, the 2 side by side, it shows essentially, whoops.
Sorry.
Yep, no worries. On the right there, you'll see that there are a number of lots through, more of the central to south end of town that are, again, not terribly large. So it's harder to do a master plan to larger scale cohesive development there.
Can I make one other comment for you?
Yes, please.
Which is about the location of this site. This site is located obviously along Highway 30, and this road that I don't want to pronounce the name of because I always pronounce it wrong, I apologize. If you've got a 50-acre need that would otherwise be met somewhere around the UGB, where are you going to meet that need? And how would it be as large and cohesive as this site? Having done a lot of looking around the UGB, I think the answer is there's no place that is as obvious as this. It's located very near your developing industrial area where you've made so much infrastructure investment, north of downtown, along Highway 30, et cetera, et cetera. And it's big parcels, which you don't have a whole lot of that you can bring in around the UGB.
Thanks, Beth. Good point. And that's why potentially if this rezones commercial, it could develop a little quicker than industrial because it does have that highway frontage. The other thing as well is, like Beth said, there are very few areas outside of this current UGB where we could get a larger parcel such as that. And so to rezone or redesignate within our existing UGB, it really allows us to use our land more efficiently rather than expanding further out essentially into a different area that's further away from existing utilities. This being surrounded essentially by utilities and already being set up with the sewer pump station, as Mr. Parker mentioned. Okay, number 11. Could a single 51-acre site support larger scale employers, regional retail? Oh,
I think, sorry, before you move on, I think Brian had.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
So when you talked about number of sites and locations, something that hasn't really been discussed much is the Air Park Business Park zoning designation. I gave council maps, and it's on the very first page. You'll see a couple of black arrows. And as you can see there, those are fairly large parcels. Those parcels included in your count of large parcels?
Those are under our designation. Specifically, I was responding to the question about contiguous commercial sites.
Okay.
One large contiguous commercial site. So yes, those are accounted for. We assumed that the airport business park overlay would develop with roughly 20% commercial uses.
That doesn't seem accurate to me because commercial land, we've just said, has more value than industrial. And if you can do commercial and industrial, you'd be more likely to do commercial there. It's also been available for 10 years or more. And it hasn't been developed. So it also brings into a question the need for commercial in that area on the scale. I don't question that part of Mr. Parker's pitch should be made commercial. I think that would be a good plan. But we already have a significant amount of acreage over there that is zoned de facto commercial. It's done through what's called the process of overlay. And so what it does is it has a base zoning that's airport, but then it has ABP overlay. If you take a look at the package when you get a chance, it lists all the uses that are allowed outright or conditionally. And it pretty much includes everything that's done in most commercial, with the exception of housing. You cannot do housing in this area. So that's one of the reasons why when I previously mentioned concerns, and I didn't really communicate it very well, that I felt like this was going to end up having a large amount of commercial. I do agree that if you put some constraints on
Mhm.
the development agreement, that would be very helpful.
Mhm.
But I don't see why we would need this much land at once, given that we already have a substantial amount of commercially zoned land adjacent to the site and it hasn't developed. Unless
Yeah,
we do
it's
housing.
correct. Thank you, Brian. It's, I guess what I would say, it's locational. It's a locational factor, right? So, you're gonna have a lot more visibility there on Highway 30 and being off Crown Z, which is why I think it could develop a little sooner.
Right, I would add to that. You can go ahead first.
Well, I don't think that they're marketing it to commercial developers either. I don't think that's their desire. I mean, at least that's not what we've heard.
Right, and that's what I was gonna say is it's number one location. Retail thrives off of highways, and that's a little bit far from the highway. Second, it's not being marketed as such from the current landowners. And third, if I'm a developer looking at places to go, and I'm looking at your zoning, I wouldn't assume that industrial allows commercial. That wouldn't be my first place to check. I would fly over pretty quickly.
Well, except,
Unless I'm working with somebody marketing it, I wouldn't look at industrial, put commercial there.
right, except for here's the problem with what you just said. Under the light industrial zoning, as a outright approved condition is retail facilities on sites greater than 100,000 square feet, meaning big box stores. So the light industrial zoning would allow for all the retail you want. So again, it gets back to that housing thing.
Just for emphasis too, Cascade Tissues is 49 acres, and that's commercial. Or is that light
And be in-
industrial?
To manufacturing,
it's-
yes, industrial.
Yeah, so it's within, there's two portions of it because that is a split overlay property. So where the building is that fronts on West Lane, that's in the airport business park. In the back end where the manufacturing and some of the warehousing was planned to go, is airport industrial park. So it fit there, but it was kind of more of a manufacturing use. All right, let's see. So number 11, could a single 51-acre site support larger scale employees, regional retailer, mixed use destination as smaller parcels cannot accommodate? So yes, large employers or regional retailers are often seeking large sites with highway visibility that can accommodate a range of uses, making them more likely to invest in a large site rather than small fragmented sites, as we described above in terms of having to, try to purchase parcels from multiple owners. A 51-acre site could support a larger anchor tenant and a mix of smaller supporting retail establishments and/or restaurants. For instance, the Warrenton Costco, as an example, is the anchor tenant to an approximately 56-acre commercial development with a mix of supporting businesses around it. So having more retail options in town also could mean that Scappoose residents would shop close to home and that dollars are spent locally rather than outside of the community. And clarification, the 56-acre estimate was just for the southwest side of the highway there, of Highway 101, and it included the rights of way. So there's actually another, what did you say, around 26 acres on the north side as well, kind of complementing that whole development. Into question 12, are there different building heights, lot coverage, or floor area ratios allowed in expanded commercial compared to standard commercial zoning? So again, we explained that anything designated commercial would come in expanded commercial nowadays, but to answer the question, the only difference in kind of the development standards there is that in the commercial zone, general commercial zone, lot width can be 50 feet wide minimum, and in the expanded commercial, it requires lots to be 100 feet wide minimum. Again, that's in recognition that the general commercial zone has those smaller original city lots. Number 13, how do parking access and design standards differ between the two zones? There's no difference in parking access or design standards between general commercial and expanded commercial. except for if property is within the downtown overlay. So in that case, there's parking reductions that can be requested. Parking lots must be located to the side or rear of buildings. And then there's also design requirements for parking lots and buildings that apply differently in the downtown overlay. So what tools, overlay zones, conditional uses, development agreements could be used to restrict or limit the number of apartments within expanded commercial zoning? So the expanded commercial zone allows apartments outright as a supportive and complementary use. Again, this is so that people can live close to stores, services, and jobs. That is going to reduce vehicle miles traveled if people can walk or bike to work. The draft housing capacity analysis shows the need for 221 units of multifamily housing over the 20-year horizon. That is primarily going to be met, if not completely, within the expanded commercial zoning district. The city's existing A1 zoning district has only 2.3 acres available for development. Multifamily development is or should be well integrated into areas with commercial retail and services with links to public transportation. And this is in conformance with 2 of our comprehensive plan housing goals. 2 and Housing Policy 5A, both of which essentially state that high-density multifamily dwellings should be located in areas of the city with access to key transportation corridors and commercial centers and other services. So staff would not recommend that the expanded commercial zone as a whole be limited or restricted in terms of multifamily development for the above reasons. And also we'll touch on some of the state statutes that are discussed in the response to number 16. However, as we discussed earlier, there may be opportunity for a development or annexation agreement that would stipulate sort of what that ratio of uses is for that property. And then I did do a look back. I know this was mentioned by Brian previously. Well, first let me mention, in my research, I looked and saw that the expanded commercial zone was, as it is today, it has been amended, but it was initially first adopted in 1995, which was 30 years ago. So this has been on the books, outright permitted use for multifamily development in expanded commercial for 30 years. And we have, we have the multifamily that we have. It's serving our community. And so to assume that the whole 60 acres would develop with apartments may or may not be accurate when we do our look back. In the last 5-year period, so since COVID, where obviously things have changed quite a bit, we've had 2 multifamily developments built, and that's the Peace Candle Apartments and then the Maple Street 8-plex. That encompasses 2.15 acres of the 19.29 acres of commercial land that received land use approval on either expanded commercial or commercial zone land during that time frame. So again, that's kind of what we've seen when we do a look back over the last 5 years. So number 15, how can zoning be written to prioritize commercial, retail, office, or employment generating uses while still allowing supportive mixed use development? So a good approach I've noted here is to use incentives like increased density or height allowances to encourage the desired type of development while still allowing the broad range of uses. So the Scappoose Development Code does this already. In our general commercial and expanded commercial zones, we allow for commercial buildings to be a maximum of 60 feet in height, but mixed use, where you have commercial on the first floor and housing above, to be up to 60 feet in height. Again, kind of encouraging that mixed use development. These zones also currently allow multifamily buildings to be up to 60 feet in height as well, but only allow for 80% lot coverage for multifamily, whereas commercial or expanded use buildings or mixed use buildings allow for 90% lot coverage. Another approach is to require that a certain percentage of the ground floor of new buildings be dedicated to commercial, office, or retail space, especially along a street frontage. So there are some tools to consider. Whenever we've talked about restricting, mixed use, essentially requiring some commercial or office space on the first floor, there's been sort of some pushback because that type of product is a little more expensive to develop, and it could inadvertently stifle some development. Is there a happy medium? Perhaps. So I just know that it's been discussed in the past that it's a little harder to develop. We do have someone here who's
I was gonna say before we move on.
has
Brian,
experience.
question.
Yeah, I had my hand up, but.
Oh,
it
sorry.
moved on a while
Sorry, I'm
ago.
waiting for
That's
the
me.
When
mayor.
you talked about past development in the last 5 years,
Yeah,
you mentioned 2 apartment buildings. And you and I had had a talk.
Yeah.
Lori and I have discussed, trying to understand
Yep.
kind of what's going on a little better. And so I hadn't done a lot of research, and you had mentioned to me that you'd seen a lot of other stuff, but besides the 2 apartment buildings, but
yeah,
I actually went through it, and maybe you can help me understand.
yeah,
it.
yeah.
The only commercial development I'm aware of in the city in the last 5 years, other than apartments on commercial zone land, is the lodge, except for mini storage and government buildings. So private sector development there's been 3 things as far as I know. If I'm incorrect, please correct me. And I consider mini storage basically apartments for people's stuff.
So when I did the look back, the food carts must not have fit that time frame. Here's what I have.
Okay.
And these are projects approved. Not all of them
Well,
have
how
been
about-
built.
Okay. Well, I'm only worried about what's been built.
That's fine. I'll just read through what
Okay.
was included. Offstad self-storage, which just rezoned. The Peace Candle Apartments, Maple Street eightplex, Dealers Market, which they're gonna do some minor improvements. Peak Performance, which was a remodel. The Remax, which went from residential to commercial. And then the restaurant complex, 3 restaurant complex, which is now quiet. Their approval expired. And then the WANA Credit Union,
So, yes, so.
which is under plan review and should be starting here
So-
shortly.
So, but if I understand it correctly, we've only had 2 apartments built and 1 commercial, and 1 commercial building built in the last 5 years. Or under construction currently, other than mini storage and approved projects that haven't gone anywhere. That's correct, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's
Okay.
it's the
Okay,
last
thank you.
5-year look back.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Any other?
Continue.
All right, now we are on to number 16. Are there legal risks or state level land use requirements that might limit the city's ability to prohibit apartments entirely in expanded commercial zones? So a couple things here. Yes, the city could be subject to a Measure 49 claim if the city were to prohibit or restrict apartments in the EC zone since they are currently allowed outright. Additionally, there are recent legislative changes to state laws that have focused on increasing housing availability and affordability, resulting in cities being unable to restrict housing in certain zones. I've included a few call outs here. Notably, ORS 197A4452B requires cities to allow affordable housing in commercial zones. Cities must allow the conversion of a commercial use to a residential use regardless of the zone, meaning this could apply to both commercial and light industrial zone properties with some exceptions. Those are referenced in number 8 at the bottom. And then cities are required to approve affordable housing, even within light industrial zones if the property is publicly owned and adjacent to residentially zoned land or a school, so long as none of the exceptions, and again, listed in reference 8, apply. So this isn't an exhaustive list of legal claims, but it does highlight, some of the more likely or obvious claims that could be brought in limiting residential development completely in that zone. How many other acres or vacant lots are available for development in the commercial or expanded commercial zone at this time? Again, we saw that map that we had up earlier, but within city limits, there's a total of 20 acres of commercial land that is buildable. 14 of those acres are vacant and 6 are partially vacant. Within the UGB, there's a total of 18 acres of commercially designated buildable land, all of which are partially vacant. Without the rezone of the 51 buildable acres, the city would have a deficit of 10 acres of commercial land for the 20-year horizon. Now, my responses to these questions doesn't take into account the rezoned acreage that we're considering outside of the 51 acres. So there was the 8 acres sort of south of the senior store between Old Portland Road and Highway 30. And do you have the rezone map you can pull up, Beth?
No, but I can, do I have that? There we go. Yes, I do.
Okay, so here you can see, and this didn't account for the acreages I just read off, the map on the left there towards the bottom where she has her cursor, that's roughly 8 acres. And then we have at the north end of town by Honeyman and West Lane. Beth, what was that? Was that 13.5 acres?
Yep.
Okay, and then on the west side of Highway 30 right there, the 9-acre parcel associated with the Ofsted self-storage is officially rezoned, and then it was very little acreage for the parcel above that. I want to say it was maybe an acre or so that's considered developable. So again, the parcels are sort of spread throughout the city, but yes, there are other areas available for development or redevelopment. Number 18, are other landowners still able to rezone to expanded commercial on smaller lots if they want, even if we show a surplus overall of commercial land? If so, what stipulations would have to occur? So yes, other landowners could still rezone to expanded commercial. Having a surplus overall of expanded commercial zoned land, rezoning within city limits if the following are met. So we wouldn't want a deficit of the type of land they're rezoning from. So for example, if a property owner wanted to rezone residential land to commercial, but we have a shortage of residential land, then we wouldn't be able to write findings to support the rezone. The land that is proposed for rezone to expanded commercial meets the characteristics of land that is suitable for commercial zoning. And again, we'd look to sort of that purpose statement for the expanded commercial zone, as well as any applicable comp plan policies, and also the development code requirements. And then as well, if you're changing the comprehensive plan map, it also needs to meet the statewide planning goals. So provided all of those items are met, we could still have rezoning to expanded commercial for other areas that we're not considering at this time. So let's see, number 19.
Can Brian?
Yep. Oh, yep.
Question, make sure I'm correct. So my understanding of it is that if we have excess inventory of a given zone, let's say commercial, you can rezone within the city if you show a need without creating a deficit, but you cannot annex more land from outside of the current city UGB to.
So I think you're asking about, because we didn't mention,
Right.
a UGB expansion for commercial.
Right.
You
Yeah.
have to demonstrate a need to
So-
expand the UGB.
So if we are in excess of the 20-year supply, which this would put us, we would not be able to do that. Is that correct?
That's correct. You would
Okay.
need to update your EOA, your buildable lands inventory, show that you have a need for commercial, which means you would have, consumed and used up some of the land currently in the inventory, showing you have a need.
If we do this as presented, I came out with a rough number of about 30-year supply, so we're 10 years over.
And
Is
again,
that correct?
these are, I didn't do the math, but generally I think it's along those lines. And so it's a question of, these are projections. How long would it take?
Yeah.
If we had development of this 50 acres right away, well, then there you go.
Well,
It's just a matter of how soon will it be
yeah. I mean,
used.
it seemed like there's a process here though, because he's got to finish filling
There is,
quarry.
there is a
He's
process.
got to come up
Yep.
with an annexation plan. He's got to deal with the flood issue, plain issues.
Yep.
I mean, it sounds like we're probably realistically 4 or 5 years out before they would be pushing dirt on the site.
Absolutely. Development takes time. I think we all recognize that. And the site does have some things to take care of first. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
I will point out though, too, just having this property come, change from industrial to commercial does not reduce in any way, what we assumed for our industrial land supply. Because this property has had floodplain on it for quite a while. In the 2010 EOA as economic opportunities analysis, as well as the current economic opportunities analysis and buildable lands, did not consider this acreage as developable under industrial designation, only because it has floodplain on it. So now that we are nearing the point that it's been reclaimed, now it's available again in the future for development and can be reflected that way. So not that there was concern necessarily raised by the group that, we're taking supply away from the industrial designation, but I just wanted to point out that this has not ever been part of our inventory for industrial land because of the floodplain.
Go ahead.
Okay. So thinking about kind of the orders of operation,
Yeah.
if we were to want to pursue the opportunity on the 51 acres or a portion of it, can we rezone it and propose it for annexation if it's still deemed non-developable because it hasn't received the FEMA map amendment?
That's a great question. Yeah, so as part of the city's process, what's being proposed is just to redesignate it on our comp plan map to commercial, not to annex it and not to rezone it. It rezones when it gets annexed in. But in terms of our consideration of it being developable, yes. We wouldn't include it for buildable lands inventory because it's mapped as current floodplain. We can consider it for future development and can annex it in, and et cetera, because we do know that those maps will be amended in the future. We're protecting ourselves by not including floodplain land because it can be harder to develop, and we don't want to assume that it's going to develop at the same type of density as land that's not inundated with floodplain. So there is no restriction around that. We could move forward with the redesignation at this point, and then go ahead and let the process that needs to unfold with the filling of the land and then the map amendment later. It's going to stay with its county zoning until it comes into the city anyway, so it kind of just is in a holding pattern, if you will.
Yes, Pat.
Would this be the time then to do the development agreement or annexation agreement?
For timelines, yes. So essentially my thought on that is how I would envision that looking is that we would make it, if the council was comfortable with having this redesignate to commercial on the comp plan map as part of our process, then I would include a condition of approval that states that before that designation goes into effect, they would need to record against that property this annexation agreement. Now, what's in the agreement is basically going to be fairly broad and say you must do a master plan, you must provide the proposed uses on the property, you must explain how your utilities are going to work, et cetera, et cetera. That would get vetted by council and recorded against the property before we would redesignate their property. That's kind of what I'm thinking, because that gives us assurance prior to it annexing into city limits that they are going to meet those metrics. Now, once it comes forward for annexation, obviously that's a public hearing and there's public testimony allowed and everyone can comment, and yeah.
Would that be the time? It seems like the biggest issue here is the housing or potential
Yeah.
for capital A housing on the site, and a lot of it. And with the annexation agreement, you mentioned you can limit it to a percentage, you can't eliminate it.
Yep, you have
But-
some
But
flexibility.
could the city require the developer to do townhome type development for the housing
And I think it's,
versus
yeah,
multifamily,
I
you
hear
know,
what
with
you're
this
saying.
3-4 stories. Because townhome type of development, even if it's for rent, it could be for sale, but it's more of a renter that wants to live in a community for a long period of time.
yeah,
Could
that's,
that be a requirement? and
that's a
still
great
hit the
question.
Still hit the housing.
Yeah, I think that that's and if you want to, get Scott's opinion on that, but again, this gives some flexibility in what that vision looks like, and so that it can actually be memorialized in this annexation agreement, whatever that ends up looking like. I would say if Scott wanted to comment on if that would be, something under consideration, we could hear that.
What is the difference between an annexation agreement?
The question was, what's the difference between an annexation agreement and a development agreement? Terminology, I'm not, it doesn't matter to me what we call it, but I figured annexation agreement might be a little better because it does need to annex in first. That's the next step. So I think that makes a little more sense of what we would refer to that as.
So in this agreement, could you give a specific cap of number of housing units? Or is it not allowed to be that kind of specific, or types? Or can you do specific, or is it going to be broader, like only 30% of the land can be used for housing? Or something like
Right,
that?
right. And yeah, great question.
I guess, I mean, like, so can council effectively manage this so that they don't end up with something
Yeah,
that
so-
they don't want?
Correct. My understanding is that yes, and I would say for the initial annexation agreement, just to, basically make sure that we have that check in time that we get what we want by a master plan and these additional specifics, is to keep it more broad. So maybe it's no more than 20% housing on this, net acreage.
So you usually do that by acreage or by square footage of building, or how do you do it? No, okay, it's okay.
It's all on the table.
Okay.
So those would be discussion points.
Okay, thank you.
And question two, I'm not real familiar with apartments, but are a lot of them studio and 1-bedroom apartments, where can you specify more 2- and 3-bedroom a percentage, which to me is more family oriented, larger families, versus more 1-bedroom studio?
Well, I would say we're going to want a really good mix because you've got students, in the area, and they're not going to be able to afford a 2 or 3-bedroom apartment. As much as we can, I would like to leave the specifics up to the developer in terms of their flexibility and being able to make this viable. I think what we're looking for here is to make sure that we're not seeing just an onslaught of apartments built. And so my desire or advice would be to, talk about this in broad strokes in terms of percentage that goes to housing versus other uses.
Okay. You got a question?
Yeah.
Could you
get it?
hand the mic?
Thank
Thank you.
you. Thank you.
Thanks, Brad.
Just as a point of clarification, the highest and best use study that is going to happen for the full 651 acres will ultimately dictate, how much housing, how much commercial, how much recreational, and all of that will be discussed with the community, obviously at large, for this development. And that was the whole basis behind the whole live, work, and play idea. So we won't really know what those percentages are until that study is done. And I'm not sure if you had mentioned, but the study that Romano Capital is currently working on is slated to be done in November.
And would that provide is that your highest and best use? The market study is going to, yep.
Right. And that's the first phase. And then once we have that, then we would go into a master planning, which would then go into the utilities, the roadways, everything like that.
Mr. Vogel.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Maybe this is just for me for clarity. You were talking about not wanting to run afoul the law when it comes to prescription on housing. Should I understand that that is more about prohibiting than it is about defining or describing?
Yeah, and that's a great clarification, Paul. And that's something that we would work closely with our attorney on for her review. I did run this concept by her and she understood this annexation agreement kind of framework. I did mention that there would be this desire likely from the council to have a vision for, say, the percentage of housing versus other uses. She did not indicate that that would run afoul, but we would look at that closely.
Thank you. It seems that talking about more the flexibility around this language in an annexation agreement could also lend itself to going back to the vision around OMIC and adhering to sort of the commercial and light industrial flexibility that I think needs to be preserved around OMIC in order to do that. Last question is there a tolling limitation on an annexation agreement? Does it have to be fulfilled, or does it go into perpetuity until executed?
Likely you could put parameters on that stated in the agreement, but this would be, in my opinion, in perpetuity. If that land is going to annex in, this applies. To your point in regards to OMIC and retaining that vision for, kind of that Sheffield model, right? We all heard about that in the early days. I would definitely want to include some language in this agreement that requires coordination with OMIC because it is important to them, their future expansion ability. And, while we have a letter of support from OMIC, we want to make sure that they're involved in the eventual planning for the site. I know that city staff, including city engineer, has an interest in having, making sure that there's some light industrial ability or presence preserved on the south side of CTP Way. Because that was the initial vision for that. And so, again, I think that those are components that can be included in that document that kind of sets that vision that needs to be taken into account before this land annexes into the city. And it's not outside of what I'm hearing from Angela and Scott in terms of what they want to do. So I think it is a good, synergy between what we're all kind of envisioning.
Thank you.
One quick point, when we talk about highest and best use and development, what we're usually talking about is highest return on our investment. And so in current market, and Pat may have some thoughts on this as well, at least from what I've seen, is that housing has the best return on your investment over commercial in this environment, unless you're in a special situation like Northwest 23rd or something like that in Portland. But Pat actually probably knows more about this than I do. I don't know if you have any strong feelings on this one way or the other.
It sounds like the highest and best use study is coming in November. So you'll have an opportunity to look at that. And I think that based on the comments here in the packet, the biggest issue seems to be housing and the concern that there'll be too much housing and it'll be capital A housing, and that won't be good for the community. So seems like that's the biggest concern. And with the development agreement, if you can limit it to 20% and you can limit it to a type of housing that is better for the community long-term, then that might be a way to
I would agree that would be acceptable.
To accomplish both.
That'd be a good idea. There's also issue of OMIG having access to land. And, one idea was to do one parcel and do the other parcel later. We also, by putting this into surplus, it prevents future annexations. So if this doesn't go anywhere, we've pretty much frozen out future annexations, which means other people can't bring their land in and do development. So I would propose that we try to keep some of this light industrial, so that Omega has a source of land. But light industrial also still can be used for research centers. It can be used for big box stores. So if somebody wants to put a big box store, if that's going to be an anchor, that can go on that land. There's a lot of different options that light industrial offers. And so I just don't, no one's really been able to tell me, and I haven't heard anything, testimony today that tells me why all of this needs to go in at once. I understand it's easier to do a master plan, but if you've got 25 acres or more land, that's a lot of land. Fred Meyer is on 10.89 acres. I put that in your packet so you'd have a map. So we're talking about 20 acres is basically twice the size of Fred Meyer. That's a lot of land. And I mean, maybe somebody wants to do something bigger than that, but I can't imagine what it would be unless it was housing.
Yeah. Just in response on that was included in the packet of what type of development would be possible would be something similar to what Warrenton has. We already mentioned about 50 acres, 70 acres total. It's not just one box store you're looking at. It's not just a Fred Meyer. You're looking at a Home Depot with a Costco, with a Panda Express, with all the little small things. They all come together. And that's something you mentioned earlier about, well, these haven't happened in our city thus far, but we haven't had 50 acres available in our city thus far either.
Okay, but then light industrial allows for that.
Not in the same way. Now, so when we talked with their developer, Ramon, what is their name? Romano. We did ask that question to them, and this is what she does for her business. And she said, no, the type of development that we work with, the type of people we work with, to attract that, we would want the whole thing in there because it makes the diversity of our development possible. And the expanded commercial provides the wider array of possibilities that they'd be wanting to attract. Another point I do want to mention, and this is all hypothetical, we talk a lot about what may or may not happen. We don't really know. A lot of this has been talking about housing, and I don't have an example of one 8,000 person community that attracts 50 acres of housing in apartments or Section 8 housing.
Yeah,
I work with a lot of bigger communities at 25,000, and they bring in like 100 or 200 of those capital A housing. And it's really expensive to bring those type of developments in. And that's just on those. The apartments likewise, I would not say, thus I don't know, it's hypothetical, but it would be hard for me to say that there's a demand here to cover that full of apartments.
well, I mean, St. Helens just did 250 units in one spot. And I've talked to several people that know people that are in the police and EMT, and they're there daily. And I haven't heard of the city having a plan for anything. I'm not saying it would turn out like that, but I guess when I worked for a Fortune 500 corporation and helped create policies and procedures, we never created policies and procedures if we could help it that we didn't know what the outcome was going to be. And it sounds like there's so many questions here right now, unless you can control it tightly with the development agreement or reduce the acreage, you're creating a kind of open-ended thing where you have no idea where it's going to go. Nor do I. Nobody knows. We can only guess.
At the same time, you're limiting all your opportunities if you're limiting the acres as well.
Well, but we're also limiting opportunities elsewhere in the city when we don't, because
You yourself said that nothing was developed in the last 5 years.
Right.
Like there are people.
no, it's not, they're not jumping down. That's why I keep feeling like.
And I do want to make one more comment to that, Brian. We had talked about earlier that no further annexation could happen.
Mhm.
That's not completely accurate. You can do UGB swaps. So if there was a development that was out there, I don't know if you have a specific example of commercial land you're worried about,
No,
but if there were one that came in, it's like, hey, we have to do this. It's the only way to do that. There's no other lots available for us. There are mechanisms that you can still do something called the UGB swap to kind of move what we have right now, a piece of that, over there if it's not being developed, and we could accommodate something like that.
I thought on the swaps, they had to be voluntary by the owner that was getting swapped out.
You can't force it on somebody, but you can. Rainier's going through one right now.
I think Beth has her
And
hand up.
then Scott has a question too.
Okay.
Go ahead, Beth.
I'll just mention that I've worked on UGB land swaps. And first I'd like to correct the term annexation is about moving land from within the UGB to inside the city limits. What you're talking about here is UGB expansion. So annexation would not be limited necessarily by this. UGB expansion could be limited by this because you'd have more land inside the UGB than you'd need until you started running a deficit. UGB land swaps, there's some legal complications to that, but if you're not changing zoning, you can move land outside of the, from inside the UGB to outside the UGB without the landowner wanting it, as long as you're not changing zoning. So it would be land that was unannexed, not annexed yet into the city. You can move land that is annexed into the city outside of the, swap it out of the UGB. And there I would think that you'd run foul of Measure 49 if you didn't have landowner agreement. So UGB land swaps, they have some particular requirements and are essentially guided by changes to zoning.
Thanks, Beth.
God, if you had a question, could you grab a microphone?
Sure. I'm just addressing Brian's statement about OMIC and preserving land for OMIC. I had 3 partners, along with myself, that owned the 5 acres on the north east corner of my property. We just donated that land to OIT, which is going to provide it for OMIC's expansion. So they've got an additional little over 5 acres. There's a piece for sale between what we donated and OMIC. And it's quite possible that land will get donated too. So OMIC's going to have maybe 10 more acres to expand onto. And they're going to be involved with any master planning we do.
And the question then, we're talking 51 acres on 2 lots, and you really can't make that 40 acres into 10 acres. You can't divide and change lot lines and.
I mean, yes, it is possible. There's a process for that. The landowner would need to initiate that. It's in Columbia County, so any future lot, line adjustment or partition, et cetera, would need to meet the current Columbia County zoning ordinance provisions, not ours.
And we can't, in that annexation agreement, ask for 10 acres be left as or designed as light industrial, or at least focus with OMEC to allow for that manufacturing angle that they're trying to.
Well, and I
achieve.
think that that's the intent is if all of it gets redesignated to commercial, but there's either, potentially there could be an overlay zone for a portion of it that really specifies that it's more for light industrial. But I would argue that the expanded commercial zone offers enough flexibility that they can do what they want and be supportive of OMIC, without any other type of overlay, but more setting out in the master plan what's expected for that Charles T. Parker Way frontage.
Kim.
Yeah, so it's really helpful to better understand kind of the vision for this space and what a larger parcel could accommodate. And frankly, the words Costco and Home Depot in the same sentence are terrifying. I cannot think of a more unpleasant place to be than a Costco parking lot, frankly. And if you look back at the feedback we did receive from the community in the 50-year plan, so that's beginning for page 45 of the packet you prepared, Lori, all I keep seeing kind of what people value in this community is the small town feel. Let's see. Yeah, small town feel, rural feel, changing our land use planning on large scale developments that don't pair with the feedback that we did see from the community is a bit concerning to me. So I think it really would be essential to see what the plan is. And I think we need to carefully pair that against the words of our residents for what they wanted, the vision of the community.
Oh, yes.
Big box store, Costco, they seem like really nasty words in this room. And I'm not going to argue that, but I did my research and Costco will not build unless there's at least 50,000 people in that marketing area. They've got a store in Hillsborough. We don't have 50,000 people in this county.
One thing that keeps occurring to me as we're talking is that like how binding is a landowner's agreement or a development agreement or an annexation agreement? And if a developer wants to move in, what's the likelihood that they're going to say, you know what, we're going to sue you, and because zoning trumps all of this language in this document that you guys have drawn up?
So good question. Number one, we have a willing property owner to work with us, which is excellent. Number two, they could, even if it gets rezoned or redesignated to commercial, they can't annex into the city limits unless they comply with that agreement, which is how it would be written. So they could develop in the county under light industrial zoning without city utilities. They could do that and not annex into the city, but if they want city utilities and services, they would be required to annex and then comply with that agreement. So to what extent is there legal risk that they could go around that agreement? I can't answer that right now, but I would work closely with the city attorney to have her vet that language to make sure that everyone's in agreement with that.
Well, Lori, we're not required to annex them though. So what would be the legal claim that they would assert if they have no right, we have no obligation to annex them in the first place?
I believe we would. It would be a quasi judicial decision that would result in an answer. Yes, it meets our criteria, or no, it does not.
And none were in this program so far. I mean, it was really an innovation hub focused kind of around OMEC and education. And so I do think the biggest concerns, like what Pat was saying, was the housing and the type of housing on there. And I feel that we can come to some kind of agreement and look at master plan. I think I'm comfortable with moving forward on it and trying to get that agreement and keep it legal. Because I do think you're limiting opportunities and potential down the road that somebody we miss out on later because we didn't have the land available.
Okay, did we want to go on to number 19?
Before just the next one is on lot 7 on residential. Does anybody have any other information hearing from any planning commission or 50-year on the 51-acre issue?
I would like to make one final point. We talked about the advantages of a large parcel, but we didn't talk about the advantages of small parcel. During our 50-year committee meetings, we talked about, friendly local commercial centers. It was a goal to have commercial walking distance, pedestrian friendly. We talked about the ideas of many locations with many owners, many price points, many opportunities, many visions. It's very hard to have a single vision and have it work. It's much easier to have many visions and have some of them work. That's my final thought.
Okay.
Okay. Number 19, let's see, just for this mayor's comment a little bit, kind of thinking through it, but otherwise, basically he says, I believe we had asked if there were any other areas similar in size, relative cost of services and proximity to the existing UGB and connections with the existing city while still considering farm activity and soil type. This is in regards to, do we bring in sub-area 7 into the UGB or do we not, essentially? Response. We could consider additional parcels, and Beth, if you could bring up that map of the sub-area 7 and 8, that would be helpful. We could consider additional parcels in sub-area 8, which is there on the north side. Beth, it's a little off center. Okay. So sub-area 8 on its east side is abutting current city limits, and then on its west side is where we would have to essentially expand out if we weren't considering sub-area 7 parcels. It would increase the cost to infrastructure to serve those parcels, because if we went further out into sub-area 8, just because it's further from existing utility connections. Again, those are still the highest priority to consider for UGB expansion, just because of the location. Thank you. Just because of the location of existing streets and utilities that are stubbed to those areas. If sub-area 7 is not in the UGB, we also cannot plan for our wastewater, or our utility master plans cannot consider that area. That would be one, even if the residents don't want to, don't plan to annex and develop in the next 20-year horizon, it still might be advantageous just from the standpoint of being able to incorporate those areas into our master plans. In terms of it not being in the UGB or the urban reserves, that wouldn't particularly work, because you do need a logical expansion of your city with sub-area 7. Beth, if you could go back to the previous map. With sub-area 7, if we were to say sort of skip over that area and not include it in the UGB or the urban reserves, we would essentially not have that connectivity that we would want to see, heading south down into area 5 in the future. So again, go ahead.
If we do 7 into the UGB, could the first right corner of sub-area 8, the southeast corner, could he come and say, I want to be annexed into the city and become into your UGB and apply?
Well, that is considered for UGB. All the area of sub-area 8 that's circled there in blue is considered for UGB already.
Let's say the one that's outside the blue line, if they decide to come in once it's connecting, that could be a potential UGB swap down the road. If there was somebody, if there's any areas that we haven't brought in, could they ask to come into our UGB and our city limits if they're touching existing?
Would need to be in the UGB to come into to annex into city limits, and we wouldn't be expanding the UGB again unless we showed a need for additional housing land.
Well, he's swapping what we have there.
If like in 15 years, somebody comes and says, we want to come in and they still haven't come in, can you swap out part of that UGB and bring in some other area?
Gloria, can I speak to this?
Yes, please.
So your urban reserves for a swap and for UGB expansion will become your highest priority. So if you're going to swap out some land in your that's in the UGB for land that's not in the UGB, you'll have to first consider urban reserve areas. And let's say you wanted to swap out some land here in area 7, you could go to area 3, you could go to area 21, area 13, area 8, area 5. You could go to, many of those different areas as long as they were adjacent to the UGB. What you don't want to do, I'm just going to pick on this parcel right here because I don't think it belongs to anybody here. I think that's a school. You can't take that parcel out of the middle of the city and swap it out for something else because it would leave a hole in your city. I'm pretty sure that you'd have problems with that. So your ability to do swaps needs to consider the location of the existing land. So leaving a hole in the middle of your city is probably not something that would be a good idea at all, and it may not be legal.
Okay, so there may be some flexibility there, but
Yeah, I'm just trying to think if, can you grab a microphone? If we do bring it into the UGB and yours, they have to develop, which is fine. We understand that anything we bring in does not need to be developed. It's completely on the homeowner and the property owner, whatever is done at that time. We understand that going in and know that that may or may not be developed in the future. Go ahead.
What you were looking at zone 8 and you're talking about just moving up the hill to taking more land in up the hill. That would keep the line of the city there. If you don't have zone 7, if you drive over, you want to go to Bonneville, there's not a lot of net gain going over to Bonneville in any kind of expansion without Zone 7. And that's why we were trying to be upfront and forward. And I don't see how there would be a lot of difference in utility costs because you're going to be right there in Zone 8 anyway. And also, we didn't know if the Planning Commission or the 50-year group, did they get the letter? I didn't see the letter in the packet today of our letter that we submitted on the last council meeting. I just wanted to make sure they all.
It should be in last meeting minutes.
It is.
Okay. I'll make sure that you do get their letter. If
Thank
haven't
you.
already seen it.
And I haven't seen any, Lori, have you gotten any kickback from anybody in Zone 8? I haven't seen it. So, I mean, I think what you're wanting to do is work with the community and do the things that the community wants. And that's why we brought it up. Thank you.
So my question then is in sub area 8, if it starts getting developed and the southeast corner lot gets developed and then the middle lot and then the left lot, the one on the left now is touching city limits. And if they, or someone wants to buy that property and come in, then they're not in our UGB. If they're not in our reserve, then they would have to potentially look at a swap.
So
with an area that is in the UGB that does not intend to develop.
well, the area so this is showing UGB areas. The area to the west of area 8, should that all get used up, those areas west of 8 would still be identified as urban reserves. So that would make that expansion very easy
They
in the
can come
future.
in as a reserve even before every acre has been developed
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
in the UGB.
That's correct.
Oh, yeah.
As long as there's a need for housing, yeah. For housing land.
So the rest of 8 in yellow can still come in if they're touching and they're in the reserve. They can ask to be brought into the UGB.
To the UGB,
Correct.
so long as there is that landing.
My question was, Lori, when would you do a traffic study? When would the traffic study come into play? I've heard a lot of things, people talking about traffic and we're worried about this, getting out here. I haven't heard anything. I know a lot of the residents around our community are concerned about the traffic that we're dealing with.
So, yes. Good question. So we cannot plan for areas that are outside of our UGB. So that's, once these areas, once our UGB expands, then there would need to be some incorporation of our master plans to incorporate those areas. We last updated our transportation system plan, which is for the entire city, in 2016. I did just apply for a grant to do an update to that traffic study or to that master plan. If we don't get that grant, then we'll look at other options to update that. There are some other funds out there. And then absent the citywide transportation master plan, with any new development that's proposed, there is a traffic study required that looks at traffic generated by the development, safety concerns, things like that.
So Dutch Canyon 4 did a traffic safety study or a transportation study. Dutch Canyon number 4 would have done a study or a transportation study, and I'm sure it's public record and see what it says for that area.
I'd like to also point out that any land that's not that doesn't come into the UGB, we're not essentially collecting funds for future infrastructure either. So if we'll pick on area 7 here, if area 7 doesn't come into the UGB, then when we do a master plan update, none of that will be considered for future infrastructure and until the next planning period. So it essentially kicks out any funding to begin, say, 20 years out. And then generally you're collecting that money over that whole horizon in order to do those projects. So essentially you wouldn't have the money for another 20 years beyond that. So now you're looking 40 years out. I just want to make that.
So quick question on that. Can't you amend the master plan to deal with that?
You would amend it. when it's in the UGB. So if you excluded it, you wouldn't collect any money. You wouldn't do a plan update and then start collecting money for the infrastructure.
Okay, we can cover that offline.
And just to say it a little simpler, master plans are only for UGB lands, not beyond the UGB. So if sub-area 7 doesn't come into the UGB, we would not be collecting SDCs or anything related to improvements in that area. I guess if that makes sense.
Eight, you were in that direct. You would still be collecting the additional 20 acres into sub 8. You'd still be collecting that money in that area.
Within 8.
Yes, but only regarding area 8. So for instance, Old Portland Road needs storm and sewer and water infrastructure south of Callahan. None of those projects would be considered. We wouldn't be collecting fees for any of that through SDCs to do any projects on Old Portland Road south of Callahan until the sub area 8 were brought in, incorporated into the master plans, those projects identified, and then we would collect fees for them. And then at the end of that, sub area 7, yeah. And then at the end of that master plan period of time, you would hope to collect all of the money that you had sort of predicted to collect to do those projects.
What's the mechanism for collecting this money?
Just the land development. So every developer pays,
Okay.
system development.
So anybody who's developing within the UGB.
And that's they're not ancillary to that project or that site necessarily. It's just citywide. And then we have priority projects that we list. Those get vetted out through that master planning process. And so we identify critical areas of development that we would want to fund and build out first, depending on how we view how the committee would view those as being, important for development. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Are we okay moving past 8?
Yes. Okay, so we did just have one more item to go over, and that was the email received from Councillor Haugen. The full email is in Exhibit 3, but I've pulled out some excerpts for discussion tonight. So in light of the recent passage of Senate Bill 1537, the current global economic inflection point, and the absence of a comprehensive watershed hydrology study to identify constrained parcels, Mr. Haugen recommends that we retain and refine the productive elements of the current plan while deferring any urban growth boundary expansion decisions until 2030. There's some rationale provided there that you can read, but I did want to respond in terms of the one-time UGB expansion provisions in Senate Bill 1537. The city doesn't actually qualify to use that process. There were certain criteria that are spelled out in that Senate bill. Specifically, the city has within its existing UGB an undeveloped contiguous tract, and I've listed the definition there at the bottom of the page for tract that is zoned for residential use that is larger than 20 net residential acres. We do have one area in the city that would meet that. And then also,
Lauren, can you explain where that area is and how large it is?
yeah, it's over 20 acres. I don't have the exact acreage, but it happens to be your family's property. Sorry.
Thanks for putting me on the spot.
I'm so sorry. I was trying to define where it was, but
That
that's
would
it.
be out Dutch Canyon,
Yeah.
right prior to Raymond Creek.
Yeah.
How large a parcel is it?
There's two together. I want to say it's around 18 acres, and then there's and it can be separated by right of way. There's also a parcel north of it. So together, those are well over 20 acres.
Okay.
But let me keep going because there's two others that disqualify us. Also, it's going to be It's also set out that the city, let's see, the need for affordable housing. So our percentage of severely cost burdened household is not greater than the state's average. And we have less than 25% of renter households in Scappoose that are severely rent burdened. So Senate Bill 1537 set out this UGB expansion process that made it easier to kind of get that done. But it's also because as part of that, you actually have to set aside 30% of those lands for the capital A affordable housing. So you have to demonstrate that there's a need for that. So the city, again, doesn't meet the requirements for that use. Also, once the city adopts its housing capacity analysis, which shows that we have a shortage of residential land, we have to true that up. So we have to either do a UGB expansion at that time, that we adopt the housing capacity analysis to meet that land need, or you have to intensify uses within your UGB through land use efficiency measures, whether it be changes to your zoning code or rezoning land that you already have in your UGB. So those are all referred to as land use efficiency measures. We're doing some of that, but it does not meet all of the shortage that we've identified in the housing capacity analysis, which is roughly 43 acres, I believe. Let's see. So near-term actions recommended by Mr. Haugen was to rezone Parker's 51 acres with a framework that enabled the proposed innovation district while ensuring commercial land use with mixed-use elements, including multifamily housing, a 30-foot trail corridor along CZ Road for a trail connection between West Lane and Highway 30, and retention of several acres for light industrial development closest to OMIC. Let's see, and then initiate a comprehensive hydrology study in the next 5 years. So again, I had mentioned earlier, the TSP does contain Project S4, which is for a shared use trail between the areas you mentioned. So that will be required at the time that that southern parcel redevelops. Additionally, Scott Parker mentioned, and I was going to mention here too, there's a 3.5 acre parcel that just went to, that will be dedicated to OMIC by OIT. There's also a 2.94 acre parcel north of the parcel OMIC has recently acquired, as well as a 5.9 acre parcel abutting the eastern property line of OMIC. So all of those are light industrial zoning. That's an additional 12.34 acres of vacant light industrial land that's basically abutting OMIC for future expansion. And that's not part of the 51 acres that's currently under consideration for redesignation. So they have some land very adjacent that is available for future development, in addition to, this vision that would move forward to ensure that the parcels of front CTP Way, are kind of earmarked for some light manufacturing.
So Lori, how do you know what the constrained lands are when we don't have a comprehensive floodplain or watershed study?
So Joel, we are using the FEMA floodplain maps.
Right.
Our
And those were from 1988, using 1973 climate data that was interpolated. So we don't have a current up-to-date comprehensive floodplain. We don't know what the constrained lands are. And that's what we learned in the Buxton hearings. We have an expert hydrologist that pointed that out for us and talked about why we need that. And so I don't know how we can identify constrained lands without having the facts. You can't go into stuff blind like that.
Well, our current development code says that that's how we identify floodplain lands is through the FEMA floodplain map. So currently that's what we have. Like, I understand there's a need to update the study, and I don't think I think that would be very valuable to the city, but that's not what we have right now. There is the ability to update a housing capacity analysis even in 5 years, in 7 years, whatever it may be. We don't have to wait, 20 years to update this again. At that time, once this is done, the city could at that time initiate another buildable lands inventory to have a look at this.
Yeah, but I mean, the reality is that we don't know what the constrained lands are based on the expert hydrology testimony. And so it seems to me it'd be prudent to encompass, put something into this plan, into this 50-year plan that includes a component for doing that in the next 5 years.
Well, this plan should be done before 5 years, but in terms of, having that as a component, we had council vet the scope of work for this project, and that was not identified and the costs were not allocated.
Right, but that was before the facts came out.
I'm just explaining where I'm at with the scope of the project. And I think Beth has her hand up.
Okay, Beth, all right.
I just want to mention that even once you have the new hydrological study done, the amount of time it would take to get from that to new FEMA maps that were official and adopted could be significant. We've watched cities wait for a decade and longer to get updated FEMA maps. So I just want to caution you against the fact that you could have a very long delay in waiting to get new maps that you could, and the maps have to be adopted and they have to be official before you can use them in a study like a housing study or an economic opportunities analysis. So before you could use them for UGB expansion. I certainly understand the problem of very, very imperfect hydrology data for you.
Looks like Scott. Thank you, Beth. Looks like Scott.
Scott, and then I'll have the comment.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Sorry, my bad. Yeah.
So I believe somebody else stated in the meeting earlier that FEMA is not even taking map revision amendments at the moment. Is that correct?
Yeah, Scott, there has been a hold on letter of map revisions based on fill. Now, this would be based on a new hydrologic study. And so there is a question still in our minds in terms of whether or not that would be held up during this phase or not. But what I've heard just anecdotally is that they may begin reprocessing those in 2027.
Mm-hmm. So, basically agreeing with what Beth said as far as waiting for FEMA map revisions is going to take a long time, no matter how you want to, hope for the best. It's going to take a very long time. And even if the city were to decide to do the work and try to work to some other standard than the current FEMA maps, every other body that's going to be doing regulatory work, ODOT or DEQ or anything, they're all going to refer back to FEMA. So trying to do anything but just go with the FEMA maps that exist is an uphill battle. And I don't think that's one that would serve the city by taking on.
One point, thank you, Scott. One thing I was thinking about in talking with Joel over the years is maybe listening and learning more about it separate of this and going forward. And maybe talking about discussing, educating us a little more on what it is, what it means, what our options are, and where it may help us. But trying to do it now, to me, it would set this back, and this is done before we did an updated study. So I would think I'd like to continue and put this to bed, and then maybe look at for the future, as we grow, looking at a new hydrology study and see where it may benefit us going forward.
Yeah, and that's my point. I said, let's at least have this conversation going forward. And if we include that in the 50-year plan, at least there's an awareness that we have an issue here. We have a problem. That's not just in Scappoose, it's nationwide. The FEMA maps are just notoriously inaccurate. And so 40% of claims nationwide are outside of the FEMA floodplains. And so for flood damage. And so that's the kind of thing we need to be more cognizant of and explore, not just in Scappoose, but everywhere. And so that's why I'm bringing this point up.
Scott.
The FEMA map that my engineer has been looking at, I believe it is 1988 standards, lists the 100-year floodplain as a 44-foot elevation. I'm able to deposit material in the floodplain because I operate under a Dogami permit. Reclaiming a surface mine, and the designation of being in the floodplain I created by digging the rock out. So I have been filling above the 44-foot elevation. A majority of the property is already filled to that, and that's the basis that we would apply to FEMA for the map amendment. Getting the map changed, it could take 2-3 years. It could take a long time. I was told by the engineers that once the application is accepted, they have to take it because I'd be above that elevation. That's the 44-foot elevation is what I've been filling to.
Yeah, I understand that. But again, my point is, if we don't start talking about this and exploring it, it's never going to get done. And it's needed. It's needed to be done.
The hydrological study I think you're talking about is going to be extremely expensive.
Yes, it's not that bad, actually. We got a quote from Kittleson and Associates for $132,000. So.
Yeah, like I said, extremely expensive.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
So Lori, I want to thank you for preparing the package of information. I think this is exactly the type of substantive conversation that we need to have to really weigh the pros and cons. This is a big decision before us, and it will impact the community for generations to come. I do want to thank the 50-year plan committee members that came, and the planning committee who's come over the years, combining sessions to pour through all of the information. And thank you for enduring one more long meeting tonight. And I guess from all of you that participated in this process, I guess I would like to give you all the opportunity, if there's anything that you would like to highlight from the process, or kind of final thoughts or recommendations you would like to give to council as we continue to consider this, offer you all the opportunity.
Well, I will just echo what we already know from the community, that we're very concerned that I guess I should put it the other way. We want to make sure we do no harm. And that's why having input from the community is so important, because we want a community that's going to fully back anything that is done. And we all know something needs to be done. We need it. It's not that anyone is going to be negative on the project, but nobody knows what the specifics are. And that's where the community wants input, is what are the specifics?
You know, as I'm looking at it, I feel that all of this will be done way after all of us are out of here, or gone. So we're looking out for the future, our kids, grandkids, and others that will be living here forever, other than I'll still be here, up here. But so I really appreciate looking out for the others, not my interests or my specific goals and interests, but going forward. Because I wish 40 years ago when I moved to Scappoose, you know, we were doing the same, and we were looking at, some of you guys were still on here, Rita, and I'm sure Scott and Bill Blank, they made the decisions to build the highway the way that, you know, we did. And so we're around way after those decisions were made, and Scappoose will continue to grow, and I want to make sure we do it in a positive way. So I do appreciate this, Lori. I know they're tough decisions. But I think moving forward, you're looking for some direction. How would you like to know direction? I mean, it's not an official vote. We're just looking for a feeling. And if you get a good commitment from most of us in a certain way, you'll feel comfortable with that route.
Yeah, correct. So there are, Beth, feel free to join in here, but in order for the final analysis to occur for, you know, land need for the UGB expansion, urban reserves, you know, if this parcel, if the 51 acres does not rezone as part of this land use efficiency measure, It does increase the amount of land we would need to expand the UGB, and it increases the amount of land we need to expand in the urban reserves. So there's, as you can imagine, a lot of data crunching on the back end to get to our final numbers and needs, and in addition to the findings we need to write for adoption. So and also I'm extremely mindful of budget, because I've already had to come back and ask to add more budget once. Really trying to stay within the budget I've been allocated to this point. So I want to get a really good sense of where the Planning Commission and the council are, because that will come before the Planning Commission, and then you folks will make a recommendation to City Council. So in as much as we can be clear on what everyone feels confident about moving forward, I would like to hear that, so that we're not redoing findings and additional data kind of at the end. Now, granted, I just need clear direction to go to the next step. That's not to say that once we get to hearings, we could receive some public testimony that kind of changes, it's maybe something we hadn't considered, et cetera. There could be changes later. I'm not saying we're locked in permanently. I'm just saying I need clear direction so that we know which way to move, so that we can bring you back something for Planning Commission's consideration.
And then after that, does it go to county after we've approved?
Yeah, so the process will be that once it's approved locally, then it will go into work sessions with the county planning commissioners and board of commissioners, just to kind of bring them up to speed on everything. And then it will go to their planning commission and board of commissioners for approval of the components that affect them. So the urban reserves, and then any redesignation of properties that are still in the county.
So if planning commissions recommend something comes back to us, there is ability to make minor changes if through all the public comment, everything that we see that we can make a change here and there without starting all over.
That's right.
As long as it's small enough changes.
And, it could be a big change if it needs to be, but it's going to involve more budget. So
I have a question. Would the annexation plan be considered, at what point would that come into play? And in your mind, is that a major or?
It's major. So that's a great question, because I think we would all prefer that we have the results of this market study, which should be done at the end of November. It's still roughly, it will push out this process slightly, but if we could have an idea of what that looks like before that annexation agreement is drafted, I think it's in everyone's best interest.
I'm really concerned about the bigger picture of the strain on resources that what's going to be built at that site could pose on the city. Apartments aren't going to bring in the tax revenue that other things could. And so I worry about keeping up with infrastructure, the ongoing maintenance, that type of stuff. So I would really like to have an idea what the annexation plan is going to entail. I think that's a really important piece.
Prior to kind of giving direction on whether or not to redesignate it as part of our process.
Well, so we're looking at November, right, for best use?
End of November.
Okay. Is it too much to ask that we wait until that plan comes in and have a better idea?
It's not too much to ask. I would just want you, here's my, because we had a year-long delay while we got our traffic study done and kind of worked through some additional things that the 50-year plan committee really wanted to make sure was incorporated. It means that our housing capacity analysis was essentially looking at 2023 to a 2043 planning horizon, right? So now we're getting into 2026. Now, and our EOA as well is based on the 2023 to 2043 planning horizon. All that to say, we're a little, right? So because it's taken a while to get to where we're finally able to adopt, now we're looking at adopting something that's covering starting in 2023 in 2026. So it's a snapshot in time. You can roll those figures forward to see kind of where we are with things. We're not going to change all of the numbers in the plan to bring them up to 2026, because again, mountain of work. Nope. Yeah, that's saying no way. It is still relevant though to the 20-year horizon. But that's my only like, oh gosh, like let's get this adopted. I've already noticed the state, so we've held that planning horizon for our adoption purposes. We're fine there. That's the only thing in my mind that's like, oh gosh, could we, move forward? But I do think for the greater good and for the comfort of council that what that looks like, it could be worth waiting.
Well, I'm concerned that what the study comes back as versus what council expects or what we'd want in the annexation plan might be too far apart. And then where does that leave us? If we get too far ahead of ourselves and both parties are spending significant resources and money on something that we're never going to be able to come to terms with, then it would just seem to make more sense that we have a better understanding of what Mr. Parker is going to be comfortable with before we go down this route, because council may not, I'm not saying that I have no idea what this looks like.
Sure.
I don't have the crystal ball, but I'm just a little concerned that what makes sense for them doesn't make sense for us. And then we can't come to an agreement on what a annexation plan would actually entail.
Beth, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I want to mention that the H&A that you've got will in fact go stale. I can't remember if it's the end of 2026 or in 2027. We'll have to look that up in the statutes, because this is done via what we'd call the old process for doing a housing needs analysis. And I can't remember what the deadline is to adopt the old process. It is not the beginning of 2026. I'm fairly positive. I'm fairly positive it's somewhere in 2027. But I'll want to get that information. So there is something of a ticking clock. I don't think that necessarily waiting until the end of November for a decision about whether you're going to rezone this parcel or not is a problem. But you can't keep going on too far beyond that.
Can I give a recommendation, and then pending the report, and if it comes back something completely different than what we thought, or it's a whole different route, then we can revisit. Or we have been doing a lot of work up into that point, and then all of a sudden maybe you have to change some things, and you would rather just wait and see. But I would prefer, I'm ready to kind of give some feelings on where I think we could go.
Let me hear, did you have something to say before I?
Oh, I was just going to say, with all this, once again, thank you, council, 50-year committee, planning commission. This is exciting stuff. It really is. And there are a lot of opportunities of how a city can grow. And it really does come down to how the city wants to grow. If we can control that as best as possible, that's definitely how we want to go forward with any of this. There's been a lot of discussion of opportunities, and it's been great to hear what things maybe are not as favorable, because that really does help steer some of that, and especially for Scott Parker, as he's trying to come with his own plan as well of what that might look like for us. I do think it would be good with this, since there is something so close to being finished, and it is such a high interest to all involved, that getting that, whether it's a preliminary today, pending that, or after, but to have that involved so you guys can see that. With the caveat of, if it doesn't happen here, there is still the possibility that Scott could come and rezone it after, as long as he, fills the needs and can prove that it's still worthwhile, and he could do it on his own accord without us as well as a possibility. But no, this is a great conversation. I just wanted to say thank you for everybody who's participating and spent so much time on this over the years. It's a ton of work. So
I would,
Yeah. Laura, you wanted to know where we all are on this. So I'm fully in favor of waiting for the Romano study to come out.
Okay.
In November. That's a month and a half away, presumably. And I'm fully in favor of developing a hotel that'll serve OMIC but as long as this is thoughtfully done. I'm still not entirely convinced that we need to expand the UGB at this particular juncture. So that's where I am.
Okay.
Obviously, with this UGB and the 50-year plan, that's updating codes and stuff based on the FEMA plan and based on the line. So if in 5 years we do studies and change hydrology, we would then have to go in and maybe change zones at the time, codes or based on building and.
Not necessarily change zones or, yeah, the floodplain maps would change, yeah,
Okay.
potentially.
So the UGB expansion doesn't necessarily give them the ability to go build tomorrow in the UGB or.
They would
they're
just
still
need
gonna
to
have go
annex.
By the codes
Yeah.
at that time.
Mhm.
Okay. I don't mind giving it information, and I'd like to see that report just to kind of see if it is what I'm hoping it is. I kind of ran and really stressed on jobs. I really wanted to bring jobs to Scappoose and not see so many people driving out of town. You know, I've heard a lot, we need more restaurants. All I've heard, restaurants, places to shop, but just things to do here so I don't have to go outside. And so I'm really been trying to focus on the industrial, the commerce center, bringing jobs to Scappoose to prevent them having to go over out of town. They can eat lunches here and whatnot. I like the opportunity of the bigger, I still think if it's not feasible, they're not going to come. If a Costco says it's not feasible and not the right thing to do, they're not going to come. Any of these businesses probably don't go where they don't think they're needed. So I would like to, with the idea, I understand what Brian's saying, and I feel the same way on a lot of it on housing. State has said we need housing, but I'd like to do it smartly. And with the plan, I love the innovation center, the education. Our kids can't afford to live here in Scappoose. All of our kids move out of high school and leave, and maybe they come back 20 years later or get a job as a police officer and come back within 5 years. But I want to be able to provide jobs for them and the education, teach our high school kids a good job here. And I think OMIC has a lot of those opportunities, and being able to build around that is great. So I'm in favor of proceeding with the 51, but with a really good agreement or an understanding of trying to come to I know 10 years it could change but I'd like to proceed that way.
Okay,
I mean, that's
so,
my thoughts.
so how about this? Because it is not that long to wait and we do want to have that assurance. How about if we were to, there is some internal work we can be doing, that's going to move forward regardless. So we can be doing what we can in the meantime, but bring that study back and have a presentation at the time that it's completed. That would also provide additional time to start putting together whatever this annexation agreement language could be, because I would want it to be vetted by council as well. So, it pushes this out a little bit longer, but we get the product and the vision that council's interested
Could this
in.
best practice study come out saying, well, it really looks like you need about 22 acres for commercial and 27 acres for industrial, because that's what the market's really shown is needed.
Sure.
So it could change their thoughts too a little bit.
May I can I ask a question on that? So what are the parameters of the study that's being done? Are they based on 51 acres or are they based on different scenarios?
So the,
Grab a
the
microphone.
RFP,
Sorry.
The RFP that we sent out to different groups and groups that had responded was based on the entire 50 acres being rezoned to expanded commercial. And so that gives us, as we talked about earlier, a wider breadth of opportunity for development. Yes, housing is included in that, but as Scott and I looked at the vision, looked at what OMIC is, looked at how Sheffield, England kind of blew up over time, it's important, as you said, to bring the jobs here, but to also have housing for those jobs that are coming here, and to have a thoughtful plan in and around of creating recreational development. And I think that that's what's going to be answered in this. Now, if the city council was to say, well, we're only going to bring half of that in, then we need to change the scope of what comes back in that. So that was really where we were going in our initial conversation with city staff, was expanded commercial for the full 51 acres.
I can tell you what my concern is. mostly out of all of this, and that is apartments and the strain that they're going to put on the city's infrastructure and how we're going to be able to maintain that with such a poor, basically tax base that apartments bring to the city. It's going to create a very significant strain long-term for the city infrastructure wise.
Yeah, and I think that that's a very valid point. And I would tell you that most developers, when they're going through their due diligence, are looking at those requirements. That is all part of the development process is, am I going to get enough power? Am I going to get enough water and sewer to support my development? And so all of that goes into consideration. And I believe that the company that they hire will probably discuss those things in that report as well.
Okay, and then my last question is how firm is your November date? How certain is that November date that you're going to have that product?
That was the date sent to us in an email from Romano Capital.
Okay.
I would tell them that the city is waiting, to hear from them. So
Of course, we will have that conversation with them tomorrow.
Well, and
Was,
if I may, so I guess I'm leaning more in favor of doing a more phased approach for the development of this, kind of taking in the first parcel, and then if that kind of develops as anticipated, bringing in the additional land rather than just bringing it all in together, because we have had land that has just sat there. I also think having diversified economic development opportunities across the city makes sense. So we're not placing all of our bets in just one basket. I think the last time you all presented, you said it would probably be about 20 years to kind of take the vision from start to finish. And so could there be some other economic development that occurs alongside that? I think we're kind of looking at this as an either and or, and I think we can maybe look at this as an and. So for the purposes of your study, is it possible to take it in a phased approach, saying like, this is what phase 1 would look like, this is what phase 2 would look like, and kind of break it down by those parcels?
Yeah, so my understanding is that our highest and best use study is going to come back and tell us what's going to work in Scappoose, right? What's going to draw people here to develop. Number one, the master plan is where you go in and you start looking at how am I going to put the infrastructure to service what this development is going to be, the roads, access to sewer, water, and power, right? So all of that is, you have to look at this, it is going to be phased in development. None of it's all going to just start developing, tomorrow. So there will be phased development that happens, but what we're trying to do is attract the developers to come here. And the easiest way to do that is to have one big area that is zoned expanded commercial, because it does give us the flexibility to bring in multiple different entities. And also at the same time, master plan, that's the key, is master planned development.
And you can see the master plan, 51 acres, what this development group wants to do. And you can look at that, right? And then you can say, well, let's phase this, let's do one at a time. But I think it is really smart for the community to master plan the whole 51 acres, even if you wanted to have them phase it with one piece at a time. So seeing the big picture makes a lot of sense in this case.
Yeah, I would agree. But I think kind of maybe presenting, like carving out what those phases could potentially look like for us, I think would be helpful as well.
Yeah, I mean, the master plan could come back and say, that yes, there needs to be continued more light industrial. I doubt that that's going to occur because you have such a surplus of light industrial in the Columbia Commerce Center. So it's more likely going to be office, residential, some light industrial if OMIC needs to expand, if that's part of that. But there's also a desire, and we recognize this from the community. And even as a hotel developer, I recognize the need for hotel guests to be able to walk to restaurants, bars, entertainment, also to have places to jog, go down the trails, things like that that are really going to drive people to come to this market. So I think that you're going to find ultimately that when that report comes out, there is going to be a recommendation for a phased approach, but it's also going to tell you, how does this look in terms of recreational development? How does this look in terms of entertainment, retail, office, etc. So I think you're going to have a lot more of your questions answered when you see that report.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, Angela, the market study is entirely separate from the master plan that would show a potential phasing. This is just the first step that we would receive at the end of November.
Correct.
Okay.
And then once that's done, a developer would then look at it and say, okay, we're ready to move to the
Yeah.
next step and look at a master.
So can we be clear, just so we're all on the same page, what exactly is this first report going to include? Can you just walk through that really quick?
Yeah, so generally, a highest and best use is going to give you an indicator as to, how much traffic is coming through here. What is the horizon for future development in terms of residential? What is that ratio going to be in terms of housing and access to retail? And being able to service, or what we would, in the hotel space, we call it demand generators, right? Why are people coming here? And then why are people going to stay here for a period of time, right? So all of that is coming into focus. And so when we did the market study for a hotel, it told us what was going on here. There is pent up demand for hotel room nights. But in order to continue to grow, the city has to have some type of economic development, which is going to happen when OMIC continues to expand. Other companies are looking at Scappoose as a place for industrial development or manufacturing development, or setting up offices here to support with their research and development team that's happening over at OMIC. So it's going to touch on a lot of those things. I think that you're going to see a larger indicator on what the future looks like in terms of growth. From that
Break it
study.
down like, what, 10% of retail, 20% of.
Yes, and they'll
industrial.
touch on all of that.
Right.
Yeah, they'll touch on all of that. So for us, what's the access to banks, ATMs, food carts, anything like that, anything that's going to draw in folks. And that's what we focus on in hospitality. But developers, and I'm not a mixed use developer, they look at different statistics that show them how much housing is going to go here, how much office is going to go here. And they've got a whole background on why they come up with those statistics.
And it's, I'm sure, taken in St. Helens, Columbia County, Scappoose, the houses that are under construction, the properties now, it took that on consideration of what we need, what will sell here, what is there.
Exactly. It will take into account what's happening at a macro level, and then hone down into a micro.
And are we going to have access to the entire report or only sections of the report?
I'm not at liberty to say that. I would assume that Romano Capital would be open to allowing the entire report to be seen. But I don't want to speak for them because I don't represent them. I only represent the hotel project.
Okay.
So it sounds like we're okay waiting maybe for the report, but do you want, whether it's here verbally or through an email, any kind of a feeling of where we are sitting? Or do we want to wait for that on this topic?
I mean, I would love to hear just a general sense of where folks are at on the two main issues, which is, should the city rezone part or all of the 51 acres as part of our process? And I'm sorry, I'm using rezone interchangeably with redesignation. It's redesignation from industrial to commercial on the comprehensive plan map. Rezoning occurs at the time of annexation. Just make that point of clarification. So should the city redesignate a portion or all of the 51 acres? And what sub-areas should the city include in the UGB expansion? Should the city continue looking at sub-area 7 for UGB expansion? Or should the consultants and staff consider additional areas of sub-area 8? And if you want to kind of just mention where you're at, each of you or as a group, that would be helpful.
Since I've kind of given you maybe on the first part on the sub area 7, I completely understand and appreciate them letting us know so we know going in. But if I'm looking at the staff report or the recommendation that that's still the best zone because of master planning and everything, I'm still okay with zone 7. But at the same time, understanding we have other options, and if it doesn't ever come in, that there's still potential for growth elsewhere. But yeah, I'm looking at the rest of 8 between now and the adoption. If you guys come up with any kind of other recommendation that really fits, and we've talked to maybe another landowner up there that says, oh, I would really like to be able to become in UGB, I'm willing to listen to that. But I'm still okay listening to kind of the experts on this, is that are financially in the best spot to expand.
Okay.
7 is the zone that
Yes.
you commented on, correct?
Yes. And again, I'm like, why all of 7? The further, who picked that further south house property versus on 8 going one more property over. That was just a line you guys made based on how many acres that area
Yeah.
was.
Correct. Trying to go on parcel lines and get as close as we could to those totals that we need. Did you?
Anybody else?
Wait.
Yes.
And just the other consideration is utilities, contours, a lot of it's, slope. It's tough to build housing on grades that are, 10,
Yeah.
15, 20%. So that's sort of a big part of it. We went into this without having really gotten feedback from property owners at the time. So we were looking at it just from the sense of, what makes sense, what's easy, what's kind of the low hanging fruit.
Yeah, again, there's high value farmland that would be really good too, but we can't touch that. That's at the very bottom of the list.
Right.
And so this is just kind of the middle of the road, least constraints, not soil hasn't been labeled as high value farmland. And so based on where it is, I mean, if they don't come into the UGB, I feel that there are other areas that can grow and housing can be developed elsewhere, and the available lands that are within the UGB can be used up as well. Kind of where I am. Kim.
I would like to see some of the maybe different costs between the infrastructure for 7 and 8. I mean, I think 8 is still worth exploring, particularly if we haven't heard objection from the property owners, because also 7 can't come in if the property owners don't want to participate, right? So I do think we need to take that into consideration for how we can get these extra 18 to 19.
The one I would look at is the one property west of a blue, the first one line. It looks like one fairly large lot. It might be more of a slope, might be tougher, might be a dip in the ground.
Yeah. Let me just add though that, we don't have those costs developed, but I hate to keep picking on sub area 7, but it's kind of a gatekeeper to developing 8 because there's no stormwater south of Callahan. There's no way to convey stormwater right now. And we're not funding infrastructure currently to do that. So we could, absent that coming in, and just sort of say, we're going to do this anyway, because it's adjacent to the parcels to the east that are between the highway and Old Portland Road. But it seemed like a rather logical choice, given that with infrastructure there, you could develop both sides of Old Portland Road. And it's sort of 8 can't happen without 7. Because without additional stormwater improvements, zone 8's not going to happen.
The Dutch Canyons, that's limited out. You can't add more housing to
It's stormwater constrained.
You have to build another one along Portland Road, continue.
There's no outlet right now for the stormwater that drains to Old Portland Road.
Landowners.
Yes. Can you hand them the mic? Thank you. We got it.
about a year ago, I sat and watched the development of Dutch Canyon 4 as it started out. And as they started laying that out, we had a meeting with Chris and Reed, and we had to go through the developer to get that meeting. And we looked at things and we looked at drainage for that area. And they were going to level off and cap off and cut the drainage off on our land. We met with them. There was going to be 2 storm drains put in. They put 1 storm drain in. We don't know how that's going to affect us yet. So the elevations that they're doing in that ground, they're moving the elevations for reasons I don't know. Any of you are welcome to come look. But these are some of our concerns as we move forward if they were to put that in. And I just came out of a 15-year run. I came here from Hillsborough. I moved here. I love the small town. I grew up in Hillsborough, when it was a small town, and I lost that. And they went through, and when you go into a UGB 20, it's the pressures are going to be there. They're going to be coming, and they're going to be bothering you. And those are the concerns I have. As the county people in the county, I went through this, and you're going to kind of, once you go to the county and accept the approval, you're going to be left out on an island because you really lose a lot of your rights in ways. I appreciate that the city council is inviting us in. That doesn't normally happen. But you really won't have representation from the county. You have working with the city, but you're not in the city. It makes it very difficult. And these are some of the reasons we're here doing this. And to have to talk to the developers as they're going through this process of what's right and what's wrong is really difficult on a landowner.
Is it true? I think you said last time that this land was productive farmland. What are you growing on?
We're growing tall fescue on the 14 acres.
Beth, do you still have the map of the 8-7, just so when we're talking, in case it comes up?
So, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
So I guess Mike, why Beth is pulling that up. So I guess my concern is this is all based on the landowner's cooperation and transacting. And if we're going to pull, we've already heard that the landowners in 7 aren't interested in that. So then it kind of begs the question, what are we doing? Because if it's never going to get into annex, then it kind of defeats the whole purpose of what we're trying to do.
Well, what it does though is that, let's say 7 comes in to the UGB and then never develops. Well, there's still going to be urban reserve land south of Area 7. And so let's say 7 doesn't develop, but it's in the UGB, and in the future, there is a need for more housing land. They could just expand the UGB to that area south of 7. It's still a logical extension. You can see there's Area 5 even further south. So it's still the logical extension of the city.
I see what you're saying.
Okay.
So, sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No.
So the landowners in 7 don't have to be willing to transact if the neighboring areas are, then it's going to serve the same purpose, right? Is that what I'm getting?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And from hearing from Chris, the rest of 8 isn't as developable without 7 because that is where a lot of the stormwater infrastructure would have to be taking place.
How is 8 not developable without 7? I don't follow that track. Clear across the road.
Yeah, currently all of that drains east and it has to go south. It basically has to go south of Dutch Canyon and then basically to Old Portland Road and then south to Jackson Creek. And the only way it can get there is in a storm pipe from Callahan south.
But the flow is coming off of zone 7. The majority of it is going towards Dutch Canyon 4.
Right, it goes to tract A. It's sort of draining there just because it's
You're saying
the
seven
nearest low
drainage
point.
goes north?
Well, just the new Dutch Canyon Phase 4 goes into the storm facility that Dutch Canyon Phase 1 built a number of years ago.
But then all the water leaves and goes out towards Jackson, goes south.
It actually doesn't go anywhere. It tries to infiltrate.
So
And that
8 is-
basin is at capacity. That infiltration system, yes. Yeah, yes, and that system is with Phase 4 will be at capacity. It doesn't.
Aren't you draining, Chris? Isn't Dutch Canyon 4 draining into Dutch Canyon 1, not 2 and 3?
Correct, it drains into the pond on the side of Old Portland Road there.
2 and 3 also.
2 and 3 go there as well. All 4 phases, with the exception of a small piece of Phase 3, go to that Tract 8 facility.
I want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. So 8 is possible. It just would cost considerably more to do.
They would-
Is it not possible at all without?
Yeah, and that's not to say that, let's just say 8 wants to go and they understand the storm constraints. If we were to have a storm line extending from, in our master plan, extending from Callahan down to Jackson Creek, they could apply for SDC credits to build that because it's not on their frontage. And we would certainly welcome that. Problem with that is that storm SDCs are pretty minimal. And so there's often not enough money to incentivize anybody to do that.
But we are proposing sub-area 8 to be into the UGB. So there is constraints there on their stormwater. To go further east, it'd even be more constrained.
The other sort of limiting thing for development just generally in that area, and that's east of Old Portland Road, is sewer. There's no gravity sewer. And so that would also sort of get at that because there needs to be a pump station essentially down at Jackson Creek as well. And then that, so it all needs infrastructure. That's essentially why it hasn't developed any of it now.
And then area west, we are looking at UGB reserves. But that's-
Yeah, the areas out, yep,
Yeah.
there it is right
The rest
there.
of-
So, sorry, that's hard to see, but the blue areas were for UGB, and then the yellow is reserves.
Would we need a motion past 9?
You might, yeah, that's
I mean,
your
I would hope
council,
we're not
yep,
gonna
those
go
are your
fast,
council
but-
rules, so let's
Mr. Mayor, I
uphold
make
those.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we extend the council meeting past 9 PM.
Council President Miller makes a motion to extend the meeting past 9. Any seconds?
Second.
Second by Councilor Holmes. Any more discussion? All those in favor state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay.
Any further clarifications on the UGB questions, since we're kind of holding the rezone, or I guess I do also need to hear from others on what are we doing with the rezone.
Anybody else with information on 7 they'd like to share?
Given the
Go ahead.
given the explanation, Lori, that you gave, I'm okay with 7. And I think I've already expressed my feelings on the 51 acres.
Thank you.
Do you need any more direction from me? I think I already provided my insight.
Thank you. And then in terms of sub-area 7,
Well, as I said, I'm not convinced we need to expand the UGB at this particular point, so that would address just that.
I am in favor of listening to the landowners and not including Area 7 and looking for some alternatives.
okay.
And as far as the 51 acres, I think it does make sense to look at the entire 51 acres as a concept instead
Okay.
of trying to break it down.
Okay.
Hey, Ms. Ray, first meeting. And I've got a lot of time to study.
I've studied this for minutes.
Oh, great.
I would, from everything that I've been able to read thus far and everything that has been said here, I would be inclined to say yes on the 51. That's package. Given the engineering explanation of the importance of 7, I would be in favor of that.
Okay.
But as, if we bring this in as 8 starts to develop, they're gonna have to build something somewhere. And if 8 starts to build something that works, and hey, we could go further west, then they can say, well, they can hook in a lot easier than 7, then I would be not opposed to looking at a swap or something there, but gives us options.
And then Counselor Holmes, are you still feeling like looking more towards 8 than 7? Because at this point, it looks fairly split.
No pressure.
Sorry,
I can appreciate the engineering
Yeah.
constraints. I guess if we can come back with a little bit more clear explanation or a little bit kind of difference in the infrastructure. So it's just very clear that if we have to go to 7, why we're going to 7, that everyone kind of understands that. So I think I'm still open to considering 7. I think having just a very, very clear explanation of why that is a necessary option.
So I want to be sure that we know what to bring back because Chris went into some detail.
We could do this without having 7. We would just have to sort of fund those improvements. Either the developer would have to do these offsite improvements, if 8 were to go, they would have to fund them. And knowing that they have these extra costs, or the city would have to help facilitate that.
But I think understanding maybe that cost differential, because I don't know what these infrastructure.
I mean, we haven't put a cost to it because it's not in our master plan, just because it's not, because it's outside the UGB. We did study it as a part of the stormwater master plan because I knew it was an issue when we looked at it, and I asked them to model that entire basin and then come up with a plan, which we have. I believe we do have numbers for that, which I can provide now that I think about it. Yeah.
Okay.
So I can send those out.
And that's not necessarily fund. The city wouldn't necessarily have to bear that expense. It could be placed on the developer too, correct?
It could, because as a part of the annexation, that's essentially what we would do. We'd say you're constrained by storm, and here's what we would require. It's no different than saying the same thing about our water demand, our water needs. We sort of put that on through the annexation process. That's sort of where that gets flagged and put on that annexation approval, essentially.
It becomes a little more difficult if it's just one parcel at a time coming in though, because then you have, no one parcel owner or developer is going to be able to bear that large of a cost. So.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Did the developer of Dutch Canyon pay for this impounding facility, the pond?
They didn't, but they agreed to improve the facility to extend its life and also to be able to accommodate that runoff.
The original developer did it.
Right.
And it was built to be able to accommodate Dutch Canyon 4.
Yeah.
But when they came in, they did pay to upgrade it and fix it because it was under.
Yeah, it was, and it was essentially at the end of its life. And so they agreed to come in, they agreed to partner and then come in and rehab it and make it, kind of bring it up to current standards.
Hopefully continue to pay
And then
going forward.
Correct. And then join with HOA 1 to share in all those costs for maintenance.
Now on 5, Old Portland Road is across, there is some UGB on the west side.
That's correct.
So if by bringing 7 in, now 5 can also then come in later, because they're basically touching, they're next to the UGB. So if they had a reason, or
that whole area said, we want to develop one development and we'll pay for all the, everything they could come
Well, they
in.
wouldn't be able to annex in unless they were in the UGB, right? So the UGB would need to extend
They
down,
would have to be included in the UGB.
correct? So there would be a land need there identified, and then they could bring that amount of acreage in that was identified in the need. And at that point, they could look at, yeah, connecting to utilities and installing utilities.
Yes, if going back to the beginning, if you include 7 in and you need the runoff through 7 and it makes it economical, and none of the landowners annex in out of 7, can you answer, I mean, would we have to give up easements to get this through? Or, I mean, that's why we're here being upfront. Because it doesn't make any sense if you have to have us
Right.
to do 8 and we're not gonna be there. How do we get there?
Yeah, so we would update as a part of all of these UGB expansions we're talking about, all the master plans would essentially get amended or updated in some fashion. We would then prioritize certain infrastructure projects as being important for land development, and that corridor would be one that I would assume we would prioritize because it needs both sewer and storm, and then it really opens the door to a lot of land development there. And and those utilities would be built to city standards and they'd be put in the road as they typically are. We wouldn't be, seeking anything from any of the adjacent properties. And then we collect, however they're prioritized, the money that comes in through SDCs. As soon as we got to that bucket of money, then we would implement that as a project. It's similar to what we've been doing with our transportation master plan. You've seen those projects, Old Portland Road, the sidewalk improvements. We're looking at some others right now. Those are priority projects in our master plan. So that's sort of how that works.
Yeah, so they wouldn't come through and ask to build a stormwater catchment on the front of the properties. They would just run the pipe under the road, out to Portland Road.
So just so I'm clear, so it would have no material impact to them. It would just allow us to plan around them.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I would be in favor of looking at it.
Okay, what are the next steps then on, you need any more from us?
Okay, so I think I'm clear from council, the general direction, and it sounds like we will come back and schedule a meeting for late November, early December to have the presentation of the market study so that we can determine next steps. My hope is that at that time, we will have perhaps a skeleton of that annexation agreement, that we could also have talking points around that, hopefully at that time, because we would want that buttoned up before we go for adoption. Hopefully there's things we can be working on, and Beth will talk tomorrow about things we can kind of be getting just sort of prepared for while we wait for this next meeting.
Great. Anything else? Okay.
I am really, if you can also, sorry, if you can also please check how prescriptive we can be on the limitation of apartments.
Will do.
I would really like to know that.
Okay.
Detail.
Oh, and we have one final parting. The Yeti over there is full of fresh elk burger, straight from Pat Kessie. So please, before you leave, if you like some good elk burger, please help yourself.
Fresh elk for everyone.
Fresh elk for sure. Pacific Northwest.
And the city disclaims all liability.
Yeah, exactly.
And I want to thank all of you for coming and being part of this. Just we do ask for public comment and input, and this is why we're trying to do what's best, win-win for everybody. And I know it's tough, but I really appreciate all your support and coming.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Beth.